I think Deadpool 2 is so overrated. I don't know what people... I don't know. Just like, I don't know why it's funny to... Never mind, I'm not going to get into it. It's just like, my balls in the guy's mouth. See my balls fall into his mouth. You see the balls flying into his mouth? Like, I don't give a... What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we talk about your favorite directors and the meaning behind their films. And this episode, we're going to talk about the legendary, the one and only George Lucas from Lucasfilm. He is one of the legends in Hollywood. He's getting his own damn museum in Hollywood.
Yeah, right across the street from USC.
Yeah. Eventually he's going to get his own museum. We're going to be talking about him. We're also going to be talking about Solo, a Star Wars story, which came out over the weekend. We're going to be talking about our spoiler review of that. So if you haven't seen that, go see it. Or if you don't care, keep watching, because a lot of people don't care, apparently, considering how little money it made over the weekend.
Yeah.
Very, very little, because I was predicting something much higher. And it made like no money.
yeah. Usually I'm like the box office defender here. Like Deadpool, but I can't defend this.
See, that's what I was gonna say. Is RB3 gonna be like, no, man, come on, it made pretty good money? And I'm like, nah, I was gonna fight you on this, but apparently you're with me, because
it's a little.
If you can't make $100 million in 3 days, that's shit. Like that's.
Well, I mean, most movies would like to make 83
a Star
million.
Wars movie to not make. Oh, come on,
that's a little abysmal. It shouldn't have come 6 months after Last Jedi. People were tired of Last Jedi. You know, people were kind of getting tired of the Star Wars thing. They didn't market it right, and the reviews weren't that like great.
It was one of the lowest reviewed Star Wars movies since like forever.
Yeah.
And it's also. I mean, the idea of a Han Solo movie isn't a great idea. I've been saying that since forever. And the fact that you're following in Harrison Ford's footsteps is pretty difficult to do. And honestly, people don't want to see Solo. Like, they don't want to see like a Han Solo, the adventures of Han Solo. It's like, I don't care. Make that a comic book. I don't know. We'll talk about that eventually, guys. But first, we're going to read your comments from last week's episode where we talked about Ron Howard as well as Deadpool 2. Most of your comments were pretty positive, so let's get into it. Isaac Robinson says, the meaning of Hayao Miyazaki soon, please. Thanks for another great episode. Yeah, let's eventually do that.
Yeah.
We got to do that.
Yeah,
that's a lot of movies, but it's
a lot of movies. But it's a classic director,
and it's each one has their own like.
Oh yeah, each one we could probably do a whole like fucking
seriously,
podcast
dude.
on.
I've seen like Spirited Away, like freaking film analysis videos and all that. And it's
just
that's one movie, and that's like an hour.
Right.
So I mean, that'll be a long podcast.
The Fireflies. I don't know if that's another one. And I mean, so many classic films like this guy's done like over years. So
yeah.
We'll definitely.
Brian Souter says, my favorite 3 Ron Howard films are Willow, Splash, and The Da Vinci Code.
Wow, none of which we talked about.
Nope.
I'm sorry.
Nope.
Sorry, Brian.
I mean, RB3 loves Willow, though.
Really? Do I? Oh,
you haven't even seen Willow, bro.
Yeah, man.
Sincerest Fall says, I always love your insights into movies. My favorite aspects of this podcast is that y'all take a filmmaker's body of work and judge each one on its own merits. In saying that, please don't fall into just ranking movies. Thanks, man. That being said, we're going to keep ranking movies. What? That's my favorite new segment, and I just made it up.
That was like on the spot, segment creation right there. Pretty interesting stuff.
Gunslinger 199 says, amazing thumbnail. Hey,
thank you.
RB3, man.
That thumbnail was nice.
Tenacia says, you're not alone, RB3. Infinity War, I put 7 out of 10. Deadpool, I put 8 out of 10. Deadpool 2, I put 8 out of 10. I also found Deadpool 2 to be more rewatchable, an important factor.
Ooh,
I disagree.
I mean, Infinity War, not my cup of tea, but Deadpool 2 did the job.
Kai Gerardio says, Deadpool sucks ass. All the good jokes are in the trailer. Cool.
Wow.
I wasn't that strong about it, but Tony Wagner Mr. Tony Wagner.
Top comment.
Says, why does Ace have a strange fetish for awkward, silent female characters in superhero films, Mantis and Yukio? Yo, Mr. Tony Wagner. Hold me back, RB3. Hold me back. I'm like running into you. Hold me back, bro. Hold me back.
No, you back.
It's called a crush, Tony. I have a crush on a lot of freaking girls. I have a crush on friggin' Game of Thrones, Missandei from Game of Thrones. I crush on every freaking girl from every character in every superhero franchise. I'm a 14-year-old boy when it comes to that.
You have speaking lines?
Yes, I love badass characters, man. I love badass characters. It's funny because that's like a thing for me. I don't even want to get into this shit, but this is weird. Yeah. But like for me, it's like I've always told my friends this too. I like girls who like talk shit and talk back. So it's funny that it happens to be Mantis and Yukio, but I mean they're cute, man. I mean and Palm is hysterical. I honestly think Mantis is hysterical. Like I was talking about her on Movie Talk the other day, and people were agreeing with me that she's funny. She's funny in all those movies, and I think she's one of the funniest characters, and I think James Gunn did a good job. And I don't understand the weird backlash that she's gotten, because she has like a weird backlash that she's gotten. Yeah. For what? For that. For they're like, she's quiet and she's like useless. And I'm like, no, she's badass as fuck. Just because she's introverted. I'm an introvert. Does that make you not badass?
Yeah.
Because you're not an extrovert, you're not Tony Stark, because you're not talking shit and being, I don't know. I as someone who's very introverted and who was quiet all throughout high school, I don't think you need that to be badass.
Yeah, the Mantis is pretty. I mean, to me, like, I feel like Infinity War used their powers like the best of like.
Right.
Anything, yeah.
I told my brother that too. I was like, "Don't you want Mantis on your team, bro? That's clutch powers right there."
Yeah, like she held down Thanos for for a minute.
I mean, she could take down a god, man. Come on.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that this whole like Hollywood has a weird, strange thing towards personality types, and it's always been towards extroverts. And I feel like let's give introverts a shot, man. Let's give the people who are quieter, who are not the fast talking, shit talking people, like me and like Mantis. That being said, I crush on every freaking girl that I see. I'm like, yo, what up, girl? Like Zazie Beetz. What up, Zazie? I got a crush on her now, too. I crush on everyone.
Zazie Beetz. I mean, it's easy.
Zazie, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of true.
I have a crush on her. Yeah. Zazie Beetz, hit me up. My DMs are open.
Yep. Now let's get into. Oh yeah, I know. I've slid into DMs. I've talked about that on the show. I'm like, yo, them DMs open though.
Did you get the Mantis?
Yo, what up? Yeah, I did.
Right.
Yo, I'm like, yo, what up, Palm? I see that you're in LA though. Yo, what up, Zoe Kravitz? I see you, girl.
Zoe Kravitz.
Yo, Zoe Kravitz is like next level, though.
Isn't she like a singer now too?
Huh?
Isn't she like a singer now?
Oh, she's been a singer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, she's been a singer for. Oh, I've been following Zoe Kravitz.
No, really?
Because I got a crush on Zoe Kravitz, man.
Oh man.
Yeah, I've slid into them DMs too. Hey, you never know. Shoot your shot.
Yeah,
shoot your shot, man.
Bro.
Shoot your shot.
Gotta shoot your shot.
Let's talk about Solo: A Star Wars Story,
so
which came out this weekend, directed by question mark. No, directed by Ron Howard officially. Executive producers were Lord and Miller. That's the title that they accepted, considering how much they changed. I read an article talking about that, saying that they actually viewed a first cut of Ron Howard's cut. Mm-hmm. If they wanted to, they were shown the first cut of Ron Howard, what he changed, and they were shown it because if they wanted to fight for directing credits based on that first cut, considering how much he kept in or how much he left out, they could fight for it.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So to get a director's credit, you can see the first cut of what was changed from your movie, and if they changed a lot and you feel like
50%.
Yeah, correct. So if you feel like they changed the movie and it's not your movie anymore, you can kind of like say, you know what, I'm gonna let it go. I'm not gonna fight it. If you feel like they're literally taking your movie and then just slapping their name on it, and you're like, wait a minute, that's my movie. You didn't change enough. I'm gonna fight this. I'm the director of that movie. I made that movie. You fired me too late. You can fight it. They chose not to fight it, so they felt that it was not their movie anymore.
Yeah,
it's Ron Howard's movie.
The DGA takes that kind of stuff very seriously.
They do, yeah. Like, they very much do.
And credits and stuff like that.
That's kind of what it was about. It was about the DGA kind of showing Lord and Miller the first Ron Howard cut. So officially, it's Ron Howard's movie, which I feel pretty much that it was Ron Howard's movie. I didn't feel like Lord and Miller. There's like maybe 2 or 3 scenes where like, all right, you can tell that's a Lord and Miller.
Well, yeah, I definitely feel like for me watching, I saw it twice, really. Unfortunately,
I'm gonna see it again this weekend because I'm gonna hang out with my family this weekend, and they wanted to see it, and I was like, well, I'll just watch it with you. Yeah. There's one thing in particular that I'm very much excited for my family to see, considering this guy right here being the biggest fan of Phantom Menace. Right. But go ahead and give me your general thoughts on Solo, a Star Wars movie. Star Wars story.
Might as well just call it that.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
That's kind of what the movie was.
I feel like that's what the franchise is kind of evolved to. Yeah, it's a Star Wars movie.
It's a Star Wars movie.
Let's call all their films that.
RB3, your thoughts, please.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I saw it twice, and the reason I saw it twice because the first time I walked out of it, I was a little disappointed, but I wasn't so disappointed to the fact of being like, oh, I could watch it again, you know? I definitely think the second half of the film is a lot stronger than the first half of the film. I think that's clear. And I think part of that is because when I watched it again for a second time, I really saw, like you said, I kind of started to see the kind of scenes that kind of would have been like the Lord and Miller kind of thing. And then I feel like towards the second half of the film, they just completely abandoned that. And that's why I feel like the first half was so mixed, because it was like a mixture of the Ron Howard stuff and the Phil Lord and Chris Miller stuff. And then like the second half was just a more like narrowly focused thing. But for me, like what stood out noticeably to me is like how much of the entire beginning, I feel like all the way up until Han Solo, and this is a spoilers review, by the way, people, so spoilers to come. When they get to like that train station kind of area, and you know, I guess Han Solo and who's the chick who's like the love interest in this?
Kira.
When they get separated, I feel like that's where the movie kind of splintered off, being a more Ron Howard thing. But like that whole thing in the beginning when he's talking to the like lizard lady or whatever.
Oh yeah.
That feels very much like a Phil Lord, Chris Miller type scene. Like when he does the rock clicking, is that
sure.
rock? It feels like that kind of humor. And he's a little more animated towards that. But then I feel like the thing is, the movie gets stronger once it becomes more Ron Howard-y, but then it also flattens out, like, kind of pretty much everybody in this entire film, right? Like, there's not really a lot of personality of Han Solo. And I think the scenes where it stands out are the scenes that are more Phil Lord and Chris Miller influenced. But the Ron Howard stuff, you're just kind of looking or just phasing into the background. Paul Bettany is, like, eating up the scenery, which I love Paul Bettany in this movie. Mm-hmm. But he kind of took over a lot of the personality and flair of it.
Gotcha.
So to me, it's like I think it's not bad, but it's a little, you know, it's disappointing a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it's not the worst Star Wars movie they could have made, and I definitely think it played into the whole idea of like the space western that they've always the franchise has always been built upon. I think this one leans into it the heaviest. But that being said, it's neither here or there for me. Like, not the worst thing, but
dude, seriously, we're on the same page. I literally came into this movie. You know my thoughts coming into this movie, being like anti Lucasfilm, anti like Ron Howard, anti all this stuff. I was super team Lord and Miller, so I was ready to trash this movie. I was like, I'm gonna trash this shit, and I was like, that wasn't bad. It wasn't. I was expecting kind of bad. Like I was expecting it to be like, what is this? Cringe. But I walked out being like, that was kind of like a pretty adequate Star Wars movie. Like that's what I said on my Twitter. It's like an adequate Star Wars, fine, pretty fun movie. Like it's nothing special, but it's still kind of fun. There's scenes that I enjoy quite a bit. There's scenes that didn't really work for me. But you're right. I do feel I did see a little bit Lord and Miller-y towards the beginning, but I feel like the editing kind of took out the
it takes out the spontaneity.
Yes.
It feels like that's their footage, but then like it was edited by like a Ron Howard.
Exactly. See, we're on the same page, man. That's exactly how I felt. I felt like they kept the scene, but it's a Ron Howard editor, and it's just like, oh, we're gonna leave this in. Whereas if it was a Lord and Miller overseeing the post-production, it would have been like, oh, that's hysterical. It's funny.
What it really is for me, bro, what it really was for me, it was like Justice League, like kind of almost all over again, right? Like it was
okay.
Like,
you know how I feel about Justice League.
Not
I give that a 0 out of 10.
Well, it's not that bad. No, not that bad. But like you could definitely tell there were scenes that were like purely Zack Snyder, but then there were scenes that were Zack Snyder directed, but Joss Whedon editing kind of mixed in.
And it was like there's like little scenes that were like insert shots of Joss Whedon into the Zack Snyder, which looked terrible as hell.
The green screen with Aquaman,
or like the super weird close up insert shots of Ezra Miller's Flash going like this. It's literally, watch the movie, guys. It's 10 times it's so many times that he's going like, and he's doing faces, and you could tell that's like put it in post kind of thing, and that's just like a super tight shot of like this close that they just inserted later.
Right.
And I was like, oh my god, that's so bad. The one that stood out the most, the cut that stood out the most, for the most part though, I'm gonna counter you, because comparing it to Justice League for me, because I was comparing it to Justice League, considering it's similar, stuff that went down. I was like, this one was way better edited. Justice League was one of the worst edited movies I've ever seen. To me, it's Suicide Squad bad edited.
I don't know.
Come on, it is.
It was that bad.
But the one cut that stood out to me that I was like, all right, this is where you could see was when they were on the space yacht.
Yeah.
And he's talking to Kira.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where he's like, Kira, what's been going down? What's going on? And she's like, yeah, And then he turns to Chewbacca, and Chewbacca goes, and then it cuts, and Kira goes, you look good. Yeah. And she literally changes her like mannerisms, and it's the scene from the trailer where she's like, you look good, rough but really good. Yeah. And I was like, that was a weird cut. That was one weird cut that I was like, all right, you can tell there was a little change right there. You can even see a change in lighting there too. I don't know if you noticed that.
Right.
But other than that, it was pretty. You're right. The first half was like, they're trying to find their footing.
Yeah.
But the second half, you can tell like this is Ron Howard taking over. Right. This is him changing the third act. But for the most part, I was like, this is kind of an enjoyable Star Wars movie. Like this is a pretty adequate, fun Star Wars movie. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the cast, because I feel like that's the most important thing. I was talking to my brother over the weekend who hasn't seen the movie, and the first question he asked me, he's like, "Who's the standout? Who's the actor that takes up?" And I'm like, oh shit, Chewbacca?
Yeah,
because if you can't really name
or Paul Bettany,
fucking Paul Bettany, and I didn't want to cuss, but I'm sorry, but I thought Paul Bettany killed it.
Yeah.
Killed it.
Yeah.
He's in it for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And he killed it. I love how the first time we introduced Paul Bettany's character, and this is the first character we're going to talk about. I think his name is Dryden Voss. Let me see if I can get that name perfect. Yeah, Dryden Voss. Damn, nailed it. But the first time we introduced him, he's like, yeah, we got to talk to Dryden. Let's see what he says. He might kill us, but he might not. And then it cuts to him, and he stabs a guy. And you're like, oh, he's this crazy, weird gangster. But as soon as he introduces himself to Woody and Han, he's the coolest dude ever. He's like, what's up, guys? You guys need drinks? Hey, let's get you guys some drinks. Hey, what you guys need? Oh, you look good, man. You all right? You all right? I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry about your wife, man. I really am. I'm so sorry. And he's like, let's talk about it, man. I need to kill you guys, but I don't want to. But I really like, and I'm like, this guy's the coolest gangster ever. He's so cool. I love Paul Bettany.
Paul Bettany was the
standout
the
to
best
me.
part of this movie.
Yeah, besides someone who's in a mask, because to me, I thought Chewbacca was the best character, but that's because he's in it more.
I feel like they wrote Chewbacca the best. Yeah. That's interesting too. I mean, because that Paul Bettany stuff is clearly all reshoots, right?
It is.
It was Michael K. Williams.
It was Michael K. Yeah.
So I don't know. But it was apparently like a CGI character.
It was
too,
a CGI character, yeah.
I can't even imagine like what that would have looked like,
Yeah, and I was ready to criticize that too. I was like, how can you cut Michael K. and pull Paul Bettany? That's kind of weird. Right. But as soon as I saw him in the movie, and as soon as I saw his characterization of what he was going for, I was like, man, this guy's really cool.
Yeah.
And he literally is like 2 minutes in, and he's really freaking cool. He was my favorite. As far as acting wise, a standout for me.
Right.
What did you think of? Let's go right to the cake. Let's go to Mr. Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I just don't like. I don't know if he had like the right kind of direction. You know what I mean? Okay. Like, I don't think he was. I don't think he didn't embody the like kind of energy that Han Solo brought in the original trilogy, like kind of cool swagger, but like still a little bit like restless and like anxious. You know what I mean? It's like a very tight line that Han Solo walks of being like,
and it's so Harrison Ford too.
It walks that line of being like the braggadocious asshole while also being like the cool swagged out like space pirate. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like he got a little bit of both, but it wasn't like fully fleshed. I feel like, and this is where I feel like the Phil Lord and Chris Miller stuff stood out. I feel like when you watch that footage, it's particularly, like I said, like the first 20 minutes, you see you see Alden Ehrenreich being like a lot more lively. Like he's using his shoulders and his arms. He's like using like all of his face. You know, even though it's like pretty darkly lit, you still see like the emotions emoting out. But I feel like after when you see like the more Ron Howard influenced sections of it, he just kind of just stands there. You know, like, to a certain extent. I feel like they were going for like a really funny. I feel like the original version of this movie was going to be like a really funny fan film almost, you know, to a certain extent of like showing a fan's perspective of Han Solo. This one kind of just felt like, oh, this is Han Solo, but he's just a normal guy like the rest of us. So I don't know, but in terms of his performance, he was fine. You know, he wasn't like bad. Yeah. I just wish there was a little more. There's a little more color, a little more flavor, a little more variety. You know. Yeah. We didn't really get there was very few moments that felt like he was like the Han Solo that we came to recognize.
Sure. It's definitely better than what I saw in the trailers. And the trailers, I was like, oh, this is terrible. Like, I remember watching those Han Solo trailers, the first Solo trailers that came out, and he's like, I think we got this, guys. And I was like, ooh, that's not good. But throughout the film, I was like, all right, I can see what he's trying to do. I see what he's trying to do as far as, like, he's more like Return of the Jedi Solo, where he's just kind of like, you know, more smiley, more like, I think come on, guys. I mean, we can do this, right? And he's just like running away and like trolling stormtroopers. And like, I think that's more what he was going for, which I think would be adequate considering he's supposed to be 19 years old in this movie, which to me is just ridiculous. But this is supposed to be like a 10-year gap between the Star Wars lore. I'm sure some crazy Star Wars fans are probably going to correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure it's 10 years.
I think the movie start from 10 years, and then like when it says 3 years later, that's 7 years.
You're right. So he's supposed to be what 19 times plus 3 is 22 in the movie.
22. Yeah.
So he's about like 22 in the movie.
Yeah. I thought that scene was hilarious too. By the way, like when they like flash forward and he's at war, and then like and like when everybody's like flipping out, he's like, what did I do? Like that was I do feel like that's a Phil Lord and Chris Miller type scene too, right?
There was a few scenes in the first half that I was like, I know this is Lord and, like I said before, it's Lord and Miller shot, but it's edited post-production, which is why it doesn't have that super crazy punch that we've seen in like 22 Jump Street, where it's like, it's not only funny written, but it's just like funny edited, and it hits you in the face kind of funny. But you're right, that was a Lord and Miller one.
Yeah, the one when Woody Harrelson's like doing the flippy thing with his guns. Yeah, I'm like that's definitely like a 21 Jump Street moment.
It is, you know? and that's another character that I actually enjoy. I liked Woody Harrelson's character. I love Woody Harrelson though. I mean, I'm a Woody Harrelson fan. I think he's awesome. Shout out to Haymitch in Hunger Games. That's the fourth reference of Hunger, or fifth reference.
Yo, somebody keep tally in the comments how many Hunger Games references you've made on this podcast.
I love Hunger Games, but yeah, he's. I think he was great as Beckett in the movie. He was actually one of my other favorites as far as like standouts for characters. Right. But yeah, I thought that was. If we're gonna talk about Lord and Miller moments, I thought that was one. I also felt I felt like he didn't nail it, but I think Lord and Miller's idea of L3, it was their idea to make her like
super liberated,
super like all freedom. But I don't feel like it was shot well, like not shot well, but edited well. Because the scene where Lando is like, you guys won't believe what's going on up here. This is crazy shit. And then it cuts to the robots going freedom, and he's like stomping up. That was funny, but it wasn't like hit as well as I felt like that. You can tell like that's Lord and Miller. When he's like stomping on the board. I was like, that's kind of funny. But it's not as funny as it would have been. As it could have been, I guess. But I thought that was their idea.
I do feel like that was their idea. Too. I gotta say, man, I didn't like L3.
I was gonna say
that was really bad.
I don't think it was really bad. I just didn't. I didn't think it clicked. I didn't think, like, some people are saying, like, JTE and Christian were saying Jar Jar bad. I don't think it was Jar Jar bad. Like, Jar Jar was, like, stepping in poop and farting. And, like, that's bad. Like, that was really, or, like, you know, tripping over droids and shutting the droids off. Like, I just rewatched Phantom Menace, so trust me, it's not Jar Jar bad. It's not Jar Jar bad. But it's still, like, you're like, all right, I see what they were going for, but it just didn't click. It didn't click.
Dude, I don't know, man. That shit was, like, so crazy to me. Like, I don't know, like... I feel like I don't know. We're gonna talk about the meaning of Star Wars like later, you know.
Next week.
But This is to me, it's like, damn, man, like they used to be like the prequels. I mean, as much as people hate the prequels, I don't like the prequels either. But like, as much as like we shit on them, at least the politics in those were like kind of subtle. like, I feel like the Last Jedi and this is like.
But I don't think it's necessarily political. I don't think a lot of people are saying that. I didn't think that at all. I don't know. I'm sure we're gonna obviously disagree on this, but I didn't think. I just thought it was a joke. I just thought it was them being like, what about droids though? Like I just thought it was kind of like a weird, funny joke of like she just cares about droid rights. I don't think that was them referencing like the Me Too movement or something serious.
No, well, not like referencing the movement, but I think it is like this kind of like liberating. I mean, I feel like that's the theme throughout throughout like a lot of this movie is like freedom, right?
Yeah.
Like freedom of Chewbacca and his people, freedom of the
Empire.
droids, freedom from the Empire with the rebels, the formation of like
freedom from gangsters who have like a price on
exactly,
your head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel like that. I mean, it was a joke, but I feel like they took that pretty seriously. You know what I mean? And I think like I don't know, man. I just wish it was like. It felt like I don't know, dude. I wish they would have edited, like you said. I wish it would have been edited in a more funny way.
I think it was supposed to be
more of like a joke, but then like to me, it felt like L3 was serious the entire time, like equal rights. Am I right?
Yeah.
I don't want to fucking like. Yeah. And then they're making a. I feel like they're making a joke out of the very serious concerns that are like that what people say SJW, like social justice warrior, like that's not. There's very real concerns of like equality and equal rights and liberation and all this kind of stuff, and like it's like it's a joke, sure, but like if you're gonna make it a joke, but don't make it like this serious thing where everybody's like, oh, maybe I don't know, you know what I mean, like. So I don't know, and plus it was just stupid. Like they would have easily gotten out of there much easier if the droids weren't flipping out. Like, so I don't know. That's my biggest gripe with
the L3. Yeah, L3 was probably one of the main negatives of the movie for sure. Yeah. Let's talk about Donald Glover as Lando. What'd you think of him?
Honestly, bro, he was a little flat. Like,
ooh,
I'm not gonna lie,
shots fired. He's calling out Childish Gambino, bro.
I'm not.
He's calling out Atlanta creator Donald Glover.
Bro, honestly, no. I think there are some scenes that like he has a little more color too, but then like there's not much. I don't know. I feel like a lot of this. Yeah, I don't know.
I saw someone say he's more like a punchline in the movie.
Yes.
As far as like he's like a caricature instead of a character. I don't know if that you see what I'm saying.
I guess
he's like, he's the cool swag guy who likes capes and likes colors and likes to talk funny and wear 70s boots.
Right.
But I liked it. I thought it was fun. Like I thought that's kind of what he was in The Empire Strikes Back. Like I just rewatched The Empire Strikes Back, so for me, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what he was.
To be fair, I also like the cape joke too. Like that was pretty funny.
I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of people like that, so I was like, that's kind of realistic too. People like collecting shoes and shit. That's what I referred it to. I referred it to sneakerheads.
Oh yeah,
I was like, he's like a sneakerhead, but he's like, yo, that's the vintage sneak. Don't touch that. Don't touch that shit. Like when he said that, I was like, yeah, that's like a sneakerhead. He would say that.
Yeah. So I thought that was funny. I guess he is a bit of a punchline. I don't know, man. I thought we were gonna get like a nice like I don't know. It didn't like resonate with me. Like this is. I feel like a lot of this movie didn't resonate. Like this is Lando. This is like Han Solo. You know what I mean? Like I thought we were gonna get some like real cool. Like I don't know. Maybe it just wasn't written enough for his character in this. Yeah. Maybe that's the biggest problem, or like the directing of his character. But
sure, I feel like the weakest part of this movie, obviously, and I'm gonna shoot shots right now, is the writing, is the script. I thought that was a weak. I mean, I think the story is kind of the weakest part. I thought okay, let me to clarify. I'm gonna counter it with the best parts of the movie for me. Production design was baller.
Yeah, production design was amazing.
Cinematography was gangster. I thought that was dope. I thought Bradford Young.
Yeah,
I thought he killed it.
Talked about him on our Ava DuVernay episode with Selma.
That's right, and as well, he shot Arrival as well.
Arrival, yeah, Denis Villeneuve episode.
And that was amazing. Arrival looked awesome, and I thought this movie looked gangster. I thought the costume design. I know that's such a small thing to say, but it's so important for me, especially after rewatching the prequels, because. Dude, Phantom Menace costume design is gangster. But the costume design in this movie, to me, I was just like, yo, this shit's fire. I thought it was dope as hell. And then finally, the music. I thought the music was fire. I thought it was dope as hell. Like, there's literally a scene in the movie where there's the train scene. Where Chewbacca's like hanging on the train, and all of a sudden I hear a children's choir, and it's like, ah, And I'm like, yo!
Yeah,
like in the theater, I was like, there's a children's choir in here. And at first it took me out of the movie. But then I was like, yo, that shit's fire. It's a children's choir in a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is kind of cool.
I feel like this is my thing. I feel like the parts from those original score, it was the best score, I think, of like the new saga.
Well, the children's choir I've never heard that theme before.
Yeah.
Because I was like a child singing, like that was kind of cool. So I was like, this is dope.
Yeah, so I definitely think the new original scores are some of the best stuff. I just really hated watching like moments of like the Kessel Run and like it's just all of these old Star Wars variations weaving in and out.
The Kessel Run to me was also, I know that's a lot of people's favorite part of the movie. That was actually a part that I was like,
I kind of checked out a little bit.
It's to me, I saw it with somebody's mind and I told them it's cockpit acting. It's green screen acting. It's literally just them sitting in the cockpit and going like, put the power converter inside the blah 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 and then boost the power stream in the hyperdrive, and then it's like, I got it. Dun 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 dun. And they're like, do you have the hyperdrive converter? Yeah. And I'm like, you're just acting in a cockpit and it's green screen, and like I never cared for that. Like that's me personally, that I've never cared for. I prefer to see like action when I see because that's action, right? It's an action scene, action sequence. But I'd rather see action sequences like the third act. I actually kind of like the fight scene in the third act between Paul Bettany and Han Solo. That to me was a better action scene than the Kessel Run. And I know some people might disagree with that because that was like 5 minutes, but I thought that was like there's like, you know, attention, there's conversation, there's like acting, there's fighting, there's martial arts, there's guns, I thought that had more tension for me than the Kessel Run did. But that's just personal for me.
No, I definitely agree, and I think that a lot of, like I said, the music amplified a lot of the action. I feel like the music really played a stronger hand to the action. I feel like than the actual like characters. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
The only time we really got score was like I guess when we were like introduced to a new character or a new element and stuff like that.
Sure.
Which I guess was also kind of nice too. But it felt like a lot of the parts were kind of just borrowed from the original trilogy and stuff like that. And of course, the Duel of the Fates happens when we see the Darth Maul cameo come up in that as well.
Okay, so let me just say something, guys. My favorite all-time Star Wars character is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, okay.
And Darth Maul.
Oh, shit.
Like literally, I remember watching the prequels as a child and like falling in love with Darth Maul. Like as soon as I was posting it on Instagram because I saw it on Tuesday again, last Tuesday, and I the scene where the doors open and you hear the theme start like da, 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 da. And it's like Darth Maul and he has his hood up and then he comes up and looks. I literally like as an 8-year-old boy watching it at the midnight premiere of A Phantom Menace. I lost my shit. I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. He has horns. He's got a demon face. I was like, oh my God, he's wearing all black. He's got a double dual lightsaber. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I freaked out. The fight scene was amazing. I still think it's the best Star Wars lightsaber battle ever in any Star Wars movie. I will stand by that. And the final scene where he fights Obi-Wan Kenobi, to me, like that quick interaction that he has, like where they go super speed mode and they just start going at each other, and then Obi-Wan cuts his lightsaber in half. Like all this stuff for me is like, I'm a hyper nerd. Like I love that. And on top of that, I watch Clone Wars. I watch Rebels. I love Rebels. I loved Clone Wars. And Obi-Wan Kenobi is the best character of Clone Wars. And Darth Maul is the best character of Clone Wars. And Darth Maul comes back, obviously, in Rebels. So, dude, I am telling you right now, as soon as I heard that voice, and as soon as I saw her talking, and I heard the voice, I was like, no! I turned to my friend, and I'm like, they're doing this right now. I freaked out like crazy. I don't think I freaked out that hard in a Star Wars movie in a long time. Like it was that much of like that little kid in me from like 8 years old watching The Phantom Menace and hearing his voice and watching Rebels and knowing the voice of Sam Witwer, you know, literally talking in that voice.
So is that Sam Witwer?
That was Sam. No. It was Sam's voice, but it was Ray Park.
Okay.
Yeah. So which was kind of weird, but I was like, if he comes back, how is that gonna work? But as soon as I saw that cameo, I was like, this movie is awesome. It literally saved the whole movie for me. Like if that scene wasn't in the movie, I would have been like, it's an average movie. But now I'm like, it's a pretty good movie.
Really? Okay.
Because I love Darth Maul.
Right.
I love Darth Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I feel like they should get together.
Hey man, salute to Sam Witwer, man.
Yeah,
Man, he got
he's in a Star Wars. He's officially in a Star Wars film.
Yeah.
But my question is too now is like going forward, and I talked about this on Movie Talk, because I think now going forward we're hearing rumors. Obviously, they're not confirmed yet about a Boba Fett movie and about an Obi-Wan movie. Are we going to see what I told Mark on Movie Talk was, what if this time period we have now, literally 10 years before A New Hope, 10 years after Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, is this time gap we saw right now in a solo Star Wars story, right? Yeah. That's literally the time gap we have, right? So Chewbacca's 190, this is what we have. So at the end of the movie, he mentions we're going to go to Tatooine to see Jabba the Hutt. He didn't say Jabba, but we know it's Jabba.
Yeah.
Is the second movie going to take place with like a Jabba type kind of scum and villainy Tatooine feel, and it's going to be Obi-Wan's movie, right? What if this movie sets up the future little spin-off films that we have?
Yeah,
and what if the spin-off films is like a little mini trilogy?
Yeah.
What if this film is not a trilogy in the sense of like Han Solo is going to come back? Like he might come back for like a cameo, but what if like this next movie we're going to see Jabba, scum and villainy, Darth Maul, gangster with Kira. So Emilia Clarke will return as Kira with Darth Maul.
I think that's going to be a Boba Fett movie. I think that's going to be the whole Boba
or
Fett
it could
movie.
Be the Obi-Wan
like
movie.
I feel like if they're doing a mini trilogy, I feel like they should end it with the Obi-Wan thing.
Okay.
Like to me, it'll make sense if it was Solo, Boba Fett, and then Obi-Wan, so Obi-Wan can have that big face-off with Darth Maul at the end.
Yeah.
We see it in Rebels.
Right. I think what a lot of people are like countering me by saying, what about the scene in Rebels? They could do that in the movie.
That's what I was going to say.
They can literally copy that scene in the movie. And that would be awesome to see that in live action, because I would love to see that in live action. But to me, it's like we can see this connection come through. Like we can, like, without making it an official trilogy, you could see Boba Fett, Jabba the Hutt, and like a Han Solo cameo where he just comes in with Chewie and says, "What's up, Bubba? Peace," and he just pieces out or something. Right. And that's the connection. But we see the return of Kira, we see the return of Maul,
and you see like a post-credit scene of Obi-Wan,
and then it turns into like the next movie, right? So we see like a little mini scum and villainy trilogy kind of thing where it's like gangster Dryden Voss bosses and like Crimson Tide or whatever, the Infus Nest. The girl that revealed at the end. What'd you think of that reveal too? Because a lot of people weren't.
Oh, I thought it was dope. I mean, like I didn't have really feelings about it. I thought it was interesting. It was like a subversion kind of thing.
Because the thing, when she removed her helmet and revealed, I thought it was supposed to be like Woody Harrelson's daughter. I thought it was supposed to be Beckett's daughter with Thandie Newton. I was like, is she gonna say like father? And I was like, oh
shit, that would have been crazy.
That would have been crazy, right? Yeah. But it turned out, she's like a teenager.
Yeah,
she's like really young.
But what I think would be super dope. What if that was like Admiral Holdo, like from the very beginning, like the very origins of her, and then like she starts piecing together this rebellion, and then like starts building her way up. What if that was their back? I thought that's what they were gonna do personally. Like I thought that was gonna be like that for me would have made the movie like, oh shit. Yeah. And then going into Last Jedi, like that would have been perfect. But of course I don't know if that timeline would have matched up.
Yeah.
But then like that being said though, I definitely think that the way they handled that twist was nice. But then I also feel like it was also kind of predictable when we see at the end that they don't have the actual things with them. Like those are the real, like they had. What was the name of the?
I forget,
device?
dude.
Yeah. Whatever it was.
I'm not good at that stuff.
Yeah. No, me neither, man. Those names are crazy. But yeah, so I felt like that twist was a little predictable. But I like them. And I like that train sequence, like I said, and I also like. I really liked when they came to that island, like initially, it was like that quiet, like standoffy. That was very Western, felt like some very much like some good, bad, and the ugly, like, you know what I mean? Like it was nice, quiet. And then, and I think that's also like a bigger geopolitical thing, right? They go into this planet that's refining this substance. It's kind of similar to ore, right? They're going to like a Saudi Arabia or something like that, like a neutral ground territory. And I think they even played into that a little bit by casting a lot of dark-skinned people around in this area, which you don't see a lot of in the Star Wars universe. So
that's true.
That was pretty interesting to me. But yeah, it was of course the political commentary there too. But then it was just interesting seeing those. Are they like knights or pirates or what are you?
Yeah, they're like pirates.
Pirates, yeah. I don't know. It was cool seeing that whole and what was.
Well, they're
Warwick
like
Davis.
rebels. I think that's what they were trying to signify.
So like early incarnations
of the rebels,
Okay.
kind of like what we saw with Saw Gerrera.
Right.
Because they're rebels too, but they're kind of
like extremists.
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of what we were seeing.
Right.
They were rebels, but they weren't like really a part of like the rebel alliance or whatever.
Right.
So they're like the pre-rebels,
right?
I guess what we can say.
Right.
Yeah. Let's finish up real quick with probably my least favorite character in the movie, actually, and unfortunately, because I love her in Game of Thrones, but it was Kira. Kira was my least favorite character in the movie.
Interesting. You know, I saw this movie twice with like 2 people the first time, 2 people the second time, 2 other people, and all 4 of them were like, "Oh, Kira was the best part." So,
really?
Yeah, but they're not Star Wars fans.
Here's my thing, and I talked about this last night with a buddy of mine too. It's hard for me to separate, and I'm gonna get so much shit for this, but whatever. It's my podcast. It's hard for me to separate casting news and casting decisions. So when I see Variety and Hollywood Reporter and even interviews confirm that Phil Lord and Chris Miller auditioned Zazie Beetz, Zoe Kravitz, Kiersey Clemens from Dope, and I forget the other actress as well, but literally all young black female actresses. Yeah. And then it turns out Emilia Clarke was what they came out.
Wasn't Gina Rodriguez wasn't one of them too? At one point
no, I don't think Gina was. Okay. At least not in the casting list that I saw.
Okay.
But with the ones I saw, it was like all these like African American actresses, and they came out with Emilia Clarke. It's like I get it if she was special, but it's Emilia Clarke. She's cool in Game of Thrones, but that's kind of it. And she was all right in the movie. I can't lie. When I first saw her, as like a street rat. Also, I wanted Han Solo to sing that song, "One Step Ahead of the," and I was like, oh, dude, do it! Like bouncing off heads and running away. But as soon as they introduced her, when they're like running away, and she kind of she's like a street thug, and for like a brief second, if you rewatch the movie, you might catch it a little bit. But I'm a big fan of Misfits. I don't know if you've seen that show, but it's about like kind of like poor community people doing community service for doing like stupid like drug crimes and stuff like that. But they're kind of like street kids or whatever, and she kind of had that little like British like super street accent of like I don't know if you've seen that, but there's a character in Misfits who has like what fucking A, mate, you can't fucking type the thing and and they have like the super strong and she kind of did that with Han Solo. She's like, oh, you're gonna type, oh, you were gonna totally do this shit, and she's like has a super strong like street London accent, and she's like running away, and I'm like, oh, it's like they're kind of like street thugs. Right. I kind of feel that. But then she kind of lost it and became more like the refined person or whatever that she is with Dryden Voss. But to me, she's kind of flat in the movie. I don't know. That's my personal take for it, because I felt like I don't see the connect that they were going to go for in the character. I just don't. I never felt it. I didn't see it. I didn't see her characterization as anything special. I just felt like she was flat. She was flat to me, and I felt like if you give it to another actress, if you give it a different purpose, if you wrote it better, if you wrote her character better, it would have been better. I don't know. The character fell flat for me. Sorry, that's just my take. I didn't care for Kira.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I felt like a lot of characters fell flat.
That's true.
So like, she wasn't like anything like that standout for me. I don't know. I thought she hit the double crossing pretty well throughout most of it, and I did get a little bit of chemistry between Auden Ehrenreich and her. You know. I mean, I don't know. She wasn't that. I do wish we would have gotten more out of Thandie Newton though. As
oh my God, yes.
She was super badass.
And why did they kill her off in 5 minutes? What the hell? That was terrible, man. I don't know. I didn't like it at all. And that's the other thing too, which may be difficult to the ending, which what it's like, we're giving the money to poor people, and it's like, but you still killed my wife. You're still the reason why my wife died, y'all. Like I would have still been pissed at that girl, because we saw like they were like freaking kind of messed up too. But I think that was the whole point of it. But you're right, Thandie Newton killing her off was the worst decision they could have done. Especially when they literally didn't cast her.
So they
were like, we have enough with Thandie, and it's like, well, you killed her in 5 minutes.
Yeah. They kept Donald Glover around. They didn't even have him around at the end. Like, he just literally just flies away.
That's the other thing too. It's like Donald Glover was like, stay with the ship, bro. He literally stayed with the ship the whole movie.
Yeah.
Besides like one scene where he rescues O3, and that's kind of it. But besides that, he stays with the ship. That's the characterization of Lando. I think Lando, I don't know. He does more in Return of the Jedi than he does in this movie.
He does. So what do you think of the whole like Han shooting first thing at the end?
Oh, that was great. I kind of didn't want... I low-key... I just kind of want him to be a little bit more of a dick. And I know he's not that much of a dick because my friends were arguing back and forth. But he's kind of a dick, man. He's really... Like, I would have liked it a little better if he didn't show that much remorse. Maybe a little remorse. Be like, hey, man, you were cool. Peace out. But it felt like he was like losing his father. And I was like, bro, this ain't your daddy, bro. Like,
you literally
you just met this guy and you shot him.
Yeah.
I was like, if I would have been like, shot him, I would have been like, sorry, bro. But no, he was like straight up holding his head and being like, I'm so, and I was like, bro.
That was my biggest problem with the scene. I was like, dude, you shot this dude. Now you're acting sad he's fucking dying.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Like, that was crazy. So like for me,
that was the one thing that I was like, you're a little bit more of a dick than that.
Yeah.
Because when you shot Greedo, and it seemed like he knew Greedo for a while. Greedo and them did jobs together, and he shot Greedo and walked away. Nothing.
Yeah.
But Greedo made it seem like I've known you for a minute. And he didn't care for me. And I know I'm comparing him to Greedo, which is a terrible decision. But I'm just saying, like, from shooting Greedo and literally walking away, versus shooting this guy and like holding his head. Like, I would have been cool if he was like shot him and being like, yo, sorry, man. But he shot him and was like holding his head and he's like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, bro, chill.
So I feel like they could have, or at least they could have like established that somehow first. Like maybe Woody Harrelson tells him like early on, like you shoot first or something. I don't know. Like it just felt like it came out of nowhere. Like it was like it wasn't until like after the shot was fired and like he's like holding his guy. I was like, oh, Han shot first. Like I didn't get that whole joke until like literally, So I don't know. I wish they would have. Yeah, I wish they would have established that a little bit.
Sure. I liked it. I just didn't like how he reacted to it. Those are our thoughts on Solo: A Star Wars Story, guys. Let us know your thoughts. This is for some reason, a controversial movie. I've talked to you about it too, and I talked about it with The Last Jedi as well. But there's such a weird theme going on right now in the Star Wars community about exaggeration and hyperbole and extremism that I'm getting kind of tired of. Like, it's okay to make an okay movie. It's fine, guys. We don't have to say worst movie ever, all caps, 0 out of 10, trash. And it's like, dude, chill. It's not that bad. Like, that's what The Last Jedi people were saying. I'm like, bro, seriously? 0 out of 10, worst movie ever, Last Jedi? I was like, come on, man. There's some good things in The Last Jedi. There's some good things in this movie. It's not great. It's not bad. Like, chill. You can enjoy a pretty average Star Wars movie.
All right, so out of the new 4 films, where do you rank this?
That's tough. That's really tough for me, right? Because I was talking to my friend. It's difficult to compare this one to the trilogy. I feel like the best comparison to this would be this one to Rogue One. What do you prefer, this one or Rogue One?
Rogue One.
Rogue One?
Yeah.
Okay, for me, I like Rogue One. I just feel like that first act is really rough, with the whole like tentacle creature and the pilot and Riz Ahmed's character. I was like, this is weird. And Saw Gerrera was like, because I saw Rogue One with you, and we were, I don't know. For me, I was just like,
we're both underwhelmed.
Yeah, I was like, this is weird. The third act to me was awesome. The thing that saved Rogue One to me, and I told my buddies too, I'm kind of biased towards Rogue One because of Diego Luna.
Right.
And I was like, yo, what up? There's a Mexican in Star Wars, fam. There's a Mexican in Star. Right. Yo, there's a Mexican. Like I kept saying that as if that made the movie better.
Right,
but at the same time, at the end of the day, I was like, it's okay. I thought the third act was awesome. I thought the ending was awesome. Diego Luna to me saves the whole movie literally because I even feel like Jenna Erso was kind of super meh for me. So I might take this one over Rogue One. I'm gonna see it again because I've seen Rogue One like 3 times in theaters. So I'll see this one in theaters again, and I'll probably make my final decision. But for now, I think this one over Rogue One. Yeah. Let us know your thoughts, guys. Those are our thoughts for Solo: A Star Wars Story. Now let's get into finally the mastermind, Mr. George Lucas.
Yeah. You want to be a mechanic. Like he was very interested in cars, very interested in inventing things. I think that's very prevalent in like his work too. So he grew up and then he went to community college for 2 years. Ended up going to USC. At the time, was like a developing kind of film school. The Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences started to fund a lot of the USC film programs there. So of course, like the programs started building up, and he started learning a lot about old school films, like old classics, like the serials, all that kind of stuff, and kind of getting a wide range of influences from foreign films that were coming out during that time, all that kind of shit. So it was just really interesting time for him. And through going to film school, he made a lot of these shorts that came before, and he built up to a point where he can make this THX 113.
He made a ton of shorts, man.
Yeah.
Like if you check out his IMDb, which I am on right now, I mean, literally naming these off: Look at Life, Herbie, Freight Height, 14208, The Emperor, Electronic Labyrinth, Anyone Lived in Pretty How Town. These are all shorts directed by Steven Spielberg. So that's
George Lucas.
I'm so sorry. George Lucas. Steven Spielberg.
It's so funny because at USC they have the George Lucas building and the Steven Spielberg building.
Because they're
right
buddies.
next to each other.
It's so funny how they're like actually friends.
Yeah.
I don't know why I think that's funny, but to me, I'd be like, yo, I'm gonna kick your ass, bro, but I love you, man.
Yeah.
But these are all shorts directed by George Lucas. And I mean, getting short film for a lot of people who want to get into film, as someone who lives in Hollywood and has done some short films, or helped on short films are the ticket.
Yeah.
Those are the evidence. Those are the resume builders, you can say, for making feature films.
Yeah.
You want to get into shorts because shorts are your best ticket into Hollywood. But eventually, his first feature film was, you're right, THX 138, which is a sci-fi feature film, which is pretty small too. What do you think about this movie?
Yeah, I mean, we were screened it once at USC for kind of an alumni recognition thing or whatever, and it's very interesting. It's like an experimental science fiction film. Has a lot to say about the dystopia of the future.
Which is actually, I mean, we're obviously going to get into it a little bit more about his philosophy and about his, stuff that he currently believes.
Right.
But that's something that he believes. Right.
And he definitely has a look on to like this sterile kind of reality, is kind of disturbing depiction of the big brother mentality and how people are surveillance and how people look at us, how people, and this movie was I believe released in 1971. So I mean, this is of course during a time in like American history that was very much like skeptical of the government, right? We talked about Frost Nixon last week, the whole disparagement and division in the country during that kind of time, and this was like a prime example of like being putting that onto the expression. But of course it has like the expressionism of like the French kind of sci-fi kind of wave and experimentation as well. So it's a very interesting kind of little window into the mind of George Lucas, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's funny because it has Robert Duvall in it, who plays THX. Fun fact.
Right.
Who plays the lead in that movie. But it's funny because how old was George when he did this movie?
He must have been super young.
He must have been pretty young.
I think this was coming out of film school. He was
got it. So probably like late 20s.
Right.
Because when he was like 33 when he did Star Wars, I believe, when he directed Star Wars.
Right.
But yeah, this was, you're right. It is a very much experimental kind of sci-fi movie. Right. And yeah, you're right. It does have that kind of French. Because I'm a weird person who watches like weird foreign movies, but I've been watching some French shit, and yeah, it does have that feel of like that French kind of new wavy shit.
That like the long takes, like the pandering camera, very slow pacing when it comes to what was getting across. It's also very much influenced by 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? 2001 came out in '68. This is 1971, so it's like a much smaller scale version of that, and takes a lot of influence from the writings of like Ray Bradbury too. Particularly like stuff like Fahrenheit 451 and all these other like classic sci-fi.
What year did 1984 the book come out?
1984. I'm not 100% sure.
Let me look that up. But
that takes that's perfect. That's a perfect comparison for THX because it kind of deals with a lot of the same ideas. I think also an idea that that George plays with a lot in this movie is the idea of like artificial intelligence, right? And that's something that plays a big part into.
Yeah, because it's basically about like humans are doing tasks. They're specified for jobs instead of expression or personality. They're given numbers and codes and like THX and all these kind of letters to define who they are as an identifier, which kind of funny enough goes into Star Wars a little bit with even the stormtroopers who are designated, to do jobs.
And for a lot of stormtroopers, are clones, right? Like
the clones. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Of course, we're going to talk about more in depth the Star Wars trilogy before.
We're doing that next week, guys. Just so you know. So apologies ahead of time if you're looking for a Star Wars one. We're doing that next week.
In depth
because we want to talk about George the man.
Yeah,
no, I'm just kidding. But we want to talk about George and his other films and kind of what he means because he means a lot. Like a lot of people make fun of him now because of the prequels.
Yeah.
But he means a lot. Trust me, as someone who lives in Hollywood, he means a lot too.
Without Lucas, we wouldn't have half of the shit that we have.
We wouldn't have half of the shit. We're going to get into that a little bit more. But George Orwell did 1984. The book came out in 1949. So obviously,
okay. So there is a lot of influence there in THX, particularly the authoritative government, the highly censored, like we have to, and this is kind of on like THX kind of has that feel of like the being on the run, like the being watched constantly kind of thing, and that's a big theme in 1984 as well.
Yeah, about like class and society that is dictated by some
oligarchy,
correct, by someone bigger than who you are.
Right, and of course that's a big theme in a lot of his films. I mean, we're gonna get to the Indiana Jones trilogy later, but those are films that deal with governments that are, like the Nazis. That's like this authoritative dictatorship. And then of course the rest of the films are set. I can't remember exactly when Last Crusade is set, but it's a similar time where the paranoia within the United States influenced a lot of our perceptions of outside countries and stuff like that too. So it's just super fascinating that Lucas kind of tackles. I mean, he's always been a very political guy, I think, too.
Incredibly political. There's a conversation that George Lucas has with James Cameron that I saw posted a couple weeks back, maybe even a month back. It's very interesting because it's funny seeing James Cameron kind of talk about the kind of stuff that he puts into his movies. Because James Cameron is another guy that a lot of people love, but he's incredibly... I love James Cameron because a lot of people are shitting on him right now because it's fun to shit on him. Yeah. Because he says a lot of dumb stuff and because he's an old man. But at the same time, he's made some pretty significant contributions to film as well. I think them two, like both of them, and they're also friends, which I think is funny. Two very powerful men in Hollywood.
And they're both inventors too, right? And I think that's a lot what George Lucas is, and that doesn't get enough credit. He invented a lot of the shit that like we see today in like modern technology and film technology, visual effects. Yeah, revolutionized a lot of that stuff.
So Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, you mentioned, was... I don't have it in front of me. I thought I did. Sorry, but yeah, he definitely has that kind of mindset as far as like tasks and culture being defined by someone bigger than who you are. But that is his first movie. However,
the one that put him on the map.
The one that put him on the map was American Graffiti.
Yes.
So American Graffiti is kind of what literally gave him Star Wars.
Yeah.
It gave him the ability to do Star Wars or the recognition, the funding, the what you need to make Star Wars, which is the funny, in Hollywood is make a great first feature or make a great feature that people resonate with, whether it be big or large, and you can make a bigger movie. Production companies, studios will give you more money if they see a feature film that is quality, basically. It's the whole Whiplash story with Damien Chazelle, who made Whiplash in order to make La La Land. Because Whiplash was a short, and then he wanted to make it into a feature because he wanted to use that as a way to get funding for La La Land because it was too big for production. He wanted to get more money for it, and they were like, well, you got to prove to us that you're, because he's like, I want to make a musical about Hollywood and LA, and they were like, oh, it's going to cost too much money, make something else first. So he made a drummer movie, which was similar to what he was. That was a very personal story to him because he was a drummer kind of growing up in school, and he had a teacher like J.K. Simmons' teacher in Whiplash, which was similar to what George was doing because American Graffiti was what gave him the ticket into making a bigger production Hollywood movie, What do you think about this film, American Graffiti? Because it stars a lot of cast members that we see.
Yeah, Ron Howard, of course.
Harrison Ford, Ron Howard, Richard Dreyfuss, and people. I was watching a lot of behind the scenes stuff on Star Wars and a lot of behind the scenes stuff on George Lucas in order for preparation for this episode. People like George. Like, it's crazy because I don't know if it's because he's nice. I don't know if it's because he's such a, soft-spoken guy, kind of guy, and soft in the sense of, like, he's not loud. He's not a loud guy because there's a lot of directors that are incredibly loud, and he's much more soft-spoken. I mean, he's obviously very, like, like, he wants control.
Right.
But at the same time, when working with actors, he's very low-key, and I think that's why they like him. But, I mean, casts prove it, and he's got great casts in his movies.
Yeah.
And one of the cast members was Harrison Ford, but
kind of a smaller part in this, but
true.
Still,
but it's what kind of gave him his ticket. Obviously, Ron Howard's in this movie as well. What do you think about this movie as a whole, though? It's very much that kind of LA feel of that time period.
Coming of age, 1950s, like aesthetic, and I mean, it does signify a very specific moment, I think, in like American teenage culture of like the cool cars and the groovy music and the drive-ins, restaurants and stuff like that. It's a fun little tale that kind of explores what the transition is from being in high school and graduating high school and getting ready to go off and move out and being on your own. Has that last few days feel like? This is, of course, highly influential in other films like Dazed and Confused and a lot of these other like mid America set like coming of age stories. But this one has the kind of flair and like the ensemble to support like the overdriving story of like just hanging out, So it's a cool like hangout movie, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's also like kind of like what you said before too. It's the step into like adulthood, right? Which is obviously what coming of age means, but it's also kind of defining who you want to be in the future and leaving your friends behind, but also leaving your interests, or are you going to leave your interests? Is the big question. Like, do you want to keep what you define to be yourself behind, or do you want to keep it with you when you go into college, or to define who you are as far as into the collegiate lifestyle and all that.
Right.
So
right.
It's very interesting for sure.
Right.
But yeah, overall, it people enjoyed the film. Yeah, I don't think it made much money, but I don't think that's kind of what he was going for. I think he wanted to use it as a way to tell a personal story, because it's apparently kind of personal to him too. I don't know if you've heard that before, but it's supposed to be kind of like his kind of growing up too, was kind of what he was defining with, which works incredibly well. Like, if you're gonna make a film or if you're gonna make art, making art as someone who used to write, making art as personal as you can make it is the best you can do, because it everyone has their own fears, their own mistakes, their own what makes them happy, what makes them passionate, and putting that into art, whether it be drawn, whether it be written, whether it be a film, is what usually makes successful movies. If you're good at it, obviously, still you have to have a technicality to it, but that's kind of what he put into American Graffiti, was a very much a personal story for him, and into these characters, which let him make a movie that people resonated with, and people still regard as a better George Lucas film than some of the stuff he's made later on in his career. Some people have that opinion. A lot of people have that opinion, considering the prequels, which we will get into next week. But yeah, it's an interesting film for sure. Do you want to get into Indiana Jones first, or do you want to talk about his technological stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that I think the technology
because
plays a part into it.
Sorry, I cut you off. The reason why I bring this up, guys, is because as much as George Lucas is known for being a director, he's known for being an idea man. He's an innovator in the sense of telling stories, in the sense of ideas that he has for stories, but he wants to bring in new, fresh ideas. And the fact is, he's a writer, and he's written stuff, whether it's good or not. It's stuff good or not in the sense of like quality writing or quality film. It's the ideas and the central themes of those movies that we resonate with, aka Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I mean, Indiana Jones and obviously all the Indiana Jones films, but that is from the mind of George Lucas. People regard that as a Steven Spielberg film, which it is, but it's very much a collaboration between the two of them, for sure. I don't know if you have any.
No, I mean, I agree. Like, from a story perspective, he definitely brings a lot of ideas, but he also brings a lot of stuff as an inventor, as a technologist, as an idealist, crafting a lot of these visual effects companies, these sound divisions that really helped influence Star Wars as its creation. We're going to talk about the meaning of the Star Wars series.
Yeah,
later, but
so
this is, the technology behind those movies influenced a lot of what we come to know in modern cinema and modern filmmaking as well.
Yeah, so here we go, guys. Let's get into the technological stuff that George Lucas has done, and the stuff that he's done in film in general, and the stuff that he's done for Hollywood in general, for making film, for making movies in general. Is just something that he's very, whether or not he's like the mind behind it, maybe not, but for being the flag bearer, for being the one in front of the lines with the sword in his hand, that's George. He's the guy who's pushing it. And he pushed, especially, let's talk about digital and film. Shooting in digital and shooting in film. That's something that I've talked to my brother about, because my brother's a director, and he's funny because he likes George a lot too, and he's read George Lucas books and he's watched George Lucas documentaries and stuff. So he talked to me, my brother and I talked to me, like a long conversation about digital and film and why this is better and why that, and why digital helps, and what George Lucas meant to Hollywood by putting in and by being a proponent for putting everything into digital or shooting everything in digital instead of shooting it in film. But for everyone who doesn't know, I'm going to defer to Mr. RB3, the teacher, to give a small little explanation of like what that means between shooting in digital and shooting in film.
Well, I mean, basically, the whole difference is just the fact of, for many, many years, the only way to film was to film anything, any kind of movie, was to put it on celluloid because of the projection, right? Like you shoot it on film and then you expand it, edit it, and then expand it again for celluloid, for cellular projection. Jesus, what's wrong with me today? So a lot of the history of film we see filmed on film. However, when digital started becoming a new thing, and a lot of earlier cinema, we start to see the implication of, not early 2000s, I should say, cinema. We start to see like the implications of digital ring true, because we started having better technology in terms of digital recording, digital physical cameras started coming into prominence, and of course digital software as well. To edit on. It wasn't just like we have to keep cutting these reels. Now it had gotten to a point where you could literally import your footage digitally and work on it in post-production, that kind of way. And that's what George Lucas had a real push for, because he felt like if you shot it, there's no point in shooting these prequels on film, because this is during the prequel time, and shooting it on film and then literally have to scanning it back in to add in visual effects and then print it back out for celluloid projections. It was just like, what is this? So like the process was streamlined by shooting it on digital, having those files and importing those directly into the computer. Saves money, saves time, and plus you can actually see the footage that you're shooting, like when you're shooting it. For a lot of times when you're shooting on film, you can't, like, you have the little eyepiece there for framing reference and all that kind of stuff, but the exposure, it has to be set by the DP, and all of the lighting has to be set by that. So you can have images that are overblown, underblown, underexposed, overexposed, but with digital it kind of treated that in a much better way, in terms of having because you're actually recording digitally, you can have digital playback when you're shooting those films. So there's a lot of plus and benefits to the whole thing of digital. But I believe it was either the Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones. It was one of those two. Was the first feature-length motion picture shot completely on digital using like these Sony cameras and stuff like that. So Lucas had a big hand in that. He was a big proponent of shooting stuff on.
And nowadays, for anyone who doesn't know,
Most movies.
Most movies are shot in digital.
Yeah.
Most stuff is shot in digital. Even smaller stuff is shot in digital.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure. Go ahead.
No, I mean it's more efficient, right? It's cheaper. Like
it's cheaper. It's more efficient.
Yeah.
Now, to make a counter argument for the purists out there, because there's a lot of them, like especially I saw a little mini documentary about this, but like pure like connoisseurs of film and people who do that, who are proponents of film, what do they say that why film is better to shoot in and why it's more artistic and why it has more value to shoot in film?
Right. I mean, a lot of people see film as film being the actual medium of this art form, right? Like what makes film distinctive is the fact that it's printed on celluloid, right? And it's recorded on celluloid, or not recorded, but it's filmed on film. You know what I mean? So then, and plus, film will always have this extra kind of texture. It grabs light in a certain type of way that digital can't really replicate.
Do you feel like it can't replicate that? Because there's some people that would argue against that.
I mean, there's people. I mean, you could come. You could definitely come like very close to it. I don't know. It's like not like a perfect. Of course, nothing's like going to be a perfect replication of how it's shot on film. But of course, today but with today's technology, you could shoot something on digital and have the camera set with the right kind of settings and with the right kind of sensors too, right? Because that's the big thing when it comes to film versus digital, right? The actual digital sensors don't necessarily have the same kind of full frame that like a film camera would, right? Like in terms of the scale of the frame, like the way the frame is set up and stuff like that. And how much of that light could be captured within that sensor. Of course, a lot of cameras today are a lot better at that. There are a lot of cameras today, like we see, like the Lexus 65 that are that they used to shoot, like the Revenant and Infinity War, that has a strong sensor that's very eminent that can capture the same kind of light that film can, for example. But there's always going to be a little bit of of course, there's going to be like that nostalgic feel, right? Of like, this is the texture that film gives to the image. This is the texture this is how the lighting comes in on that. This is how the touches of grain feels on that. Of course, there's more extreme purists like Tarantino or like Nolan who wants their movies actually shown on film, like, because mostly today, most things are shot on digital and projected in digital. Maybe where we see like 80%, it was more than 80%, but let's say 80% of movies today are shot on digital, but 100% of them are projected digitally, right? Except for that, or maybe 99%, except for that one little tiny percent of like the Tarantinos and the Nolans.
Yeah.
Yeah, but 99% of everything is projected on digital, and I think that's a big part of it too. That's why shooting on digital streamlines a lot of it. But a lot of people will argue, shooting on film, you have to be more careful too, right? And that's also a big part of it. Like when you're actually on set and you have the light meter and you have to adjust carefully, it's much more of a careful process than just shooting on digital. So I mean, there's a different, there's differences, of course, but I personally always fall on the side of digital now, just because it's the most efficient, it's cheaper, you have a lot more options. Again, that's the kind of the downside of shooting on film, is like you can't really see how the final product of your image is going to come out. With digital, you can, and it's a lot more helpful.
And it started too with frame rate, right? Because talk about the frame rate about FPS. Is it 35? I believe.
24. So originally, when film started coming out, it was originally 18 frames per second that the human eye could register. Eventually, it built up to 24. The way cameras work, though, you can't really have it exactly 24 frames per second. It's usually going to be like 23.968 or whatever. But that's what the digital composition of 24 frames looks like. So it's a touch difference, but like that's but yeah, the 35 millimeters, the 70 millimeters, those are also the size of the frames that go in the film or whatever. And of course, you can't really ape that with digital. Like I said, it's the sensor size, right? Like how big are the sensors and how much light they could capture in kind of brings it closer to film. But there's definitely, there's differences, of course. There's always going to be differences. But overall, they're almost pretty much the same thing to this day. Like when all being said and done, the way the technology is today is probably the closest digital is ever going to become the film. So.
Yeah, and the reason why this is important, guys, is the fact that, I mean, obviously, let's talk about George's contribution to it. So he pushed for this in the prequels the most.
Yeah.
That's when we heard about this digital film kind of battle was during the prequel, like 2000, early 2000s, 2000, 2001.
Right.
When they were shooting Attack of the Clones, I believe.
Attack of the Clones,
I think it was Attack of the Clones because I saw the Attack of the Clones behind the scenes and they were talking about it during that. So I think it was Attack of the Clones where it was all shot on digital. But I think he did some stuff in Phantom Menace too.
Right. I think some of Phantom Menace was shot in digital, but some of it was also shot in film. But this Attack of the Clones is the first feature length film shot completely on digital, and which is interesting because I was reading again. I mentioned that book, and they kind of mentioned how. During shooting Attack of the Clones, they had received this new camera from Sony and everything, this digital software. And when you shoot on digital, they have like these red, green, blue like image filters, right? That's how film is shot. There's a red layer, a green layer, and a blue layer. For the digitals, it was recreated, but the blue side was like way, way low, which normally wouldn't be a problem, but they shot the entire movie on blue screens, right? So then, that was a big problem, and it was problematic to the sense that when they imported the footage, the blue is almost completely gone out of all the images. That's to kind of work around that. But that's where digital is helpful to some extent too, right? I mean, that's why digital had a push because it could just import the footage directly into the computer, and then George, besides digital cameras, he also helped revolutionize non-linear editing softwares, right? So the Avids, the Final Cuts, the Premieres, that's all due mostly to George Lucas and to Lucasfilm in particular. John Knoll was the co-creator of Photoshop, was a very close associate of George Lucas, and of course went on to produce write Rogue One and produce Rogue One and all this kind of stuff. But they helped develop the technology where people could actually edit on computers, and that's where I think the digital camera push kind of aped off of that. So.
Yeah, I was going to talk about cameras too, real quick. As far as the camera size and camera cumbersome, and actually being a camera operator, because I know a few camera ops. For as far as the digital camera itself.
Yeah.
Physically, was that cumbersome? Is that less cumbersome? Is that less difficult to deal with, or is that more difference than a film camera?
You have a lot more options, I think, on digital photography than you do on film. Film, you just kind of have to set the exposure and the lens and all that stuff. And I think during that time, the digital cameras were super heavy. And I think during that time too, they were only really shooting 1080p. So how
they were enormous.
Yeah,
because I saw them and they were
they're huge. They're huge back
big,
then.
The size of this table probably.
Right.
They were enormous.
Right.
And that's why I was asking, but I was.
Yeah, and then during that time it was hard, right?
But think about it now, right? Think about how much more easy it is now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people could shoot on your iPhone.
Yeah.
And then Soderbergh did was it Unseen, right? What's it called? Unsane. Shot completely.
Shout out to Claire Foy. Claire Foy's a goddess. Shout out to her.
I haven't. What's she in?
She's in Unsane.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. But is she in anything else or?
She's in The Crown. Shout out to The Crown. I love The Crown.
I gotta watch The Crown.
The Crown's good.
The whole royal wedding shit, man.
Oh man, my buddy was like, "Man, this royal wedding shit's whack," and I was like, "Bro, just watch The Crown." After you see The Crown, you're like, "Yo, Meghan Markle, what's up?" You get so into it.
Yeah, I really didn't care. Maybe I do gotta watch The Crown. Maybe
Oh my god,
after I watch The Crown,
it changed my mind. It changed my life.
And is anybody else gonna get married in the royal family soon, or is that?
Hopefully me, man. Hopefully me.
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
Do they have any daughters, or is it all boys?
But yeah, obviously what George did was, obviously we're giving a lot of credit to him, but the reason why he deserves a lot of credit is because he was one of the people pushing this stuff. He was one of the people who wanted to team up with companies like Sony, like Panavision.
Yeah.
To make cameras, to make digital, and then obviously let's get real quick into editing. So the funny thing is, I was rewatching Attack of the Clones behind the scenes, and they were talking about directing and the editing process.
Right.
How George was literally able to cut a mess up take and to reinsert it with different footage, to split the take and insert a better take of the actors, and then the other side of the screen, the actors are acting to something
Right,
else.
right.
It's literally directing in editing, in post-production. That's something that he got from the digital software. Like you said, like the Avids, like the Final Cuts, like the kind of editing softwares that we see nowadays, because he was a big proponent and making movies as easy, as efficient, as cheap, and as seamless as you can possibly make it. And if that means I'm going to recut a bad take and make it into a good take in editing and just cut. A lot of people criticize that now because they consider that to be blasphemy for film, but essentially is what a lot of people are doing nowadays is just doing a shit ton of cutting and cutting around a bad take. And he was able to do that, and he was able to even direct editors to cut another take into split takes. Talk about a little bit about what George meant to the editing process as well, as an editor yourself,
as an
too.
editor myself. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's a big part of it, right? I mean, because what what it was at the time was, you know, we call it nonlinear editing because linear editing is like editing on flatbeds, right? Like literally cutting the film and like, you know, doing it that way. And you have to cut stuff in order to just like have, you know, understanding of what, you know, what you do want to see. Of course, you'd have to plan it out and be a lot of planning process. You have to have editors and you know, and for how, you know, Lucas had this vision of like presenting this movie, he, you know, and he wanted to change things. Of course, like I know for him, particularly with like Attack of the Clones, like they didn't really even finish the script until like 3 days before filming started. So like he wanted to have a lot more control in post-production than he did, and he's always had an interest in like having more control in post-production, right? So then so and being involved in like these and these methods of like editing these films through the computers, you have a lot more options. You have a lot more that you can do, a lot more flexibility with takes. You could use, like you said, like, you know, like the I think that's like a split something, or I don't know what the exact name for that kind of thing is, but David Fincher uses that technique a lot too.
That's right, he does.
He uses that a lot, and particularly with like The Social Network and with Zodiac, he used that big time too. So then, you know, using software to edit. Software to edit the films gives you the opportunity to manipulate some of this and some of that, and allows it to work a little easier and flow a little better for the actors and the characters and stuff like that. So like that is super interesting that he used Star Wars as the opportunity, and you know, he started all of this like tinkering and stuff with the special editions, right, before the prequels. The reason why he did the special editions was so he could test the technology and see if all this stuff could work out in prequels, if nonlinear editing could work for prequels, if the new wave of digital effects and adding digital shit to the image, if that would like work for in the context of the Star Wars prequels, if that would work within the old films first. So again, kudos to Lucas for
he's been doing this forever, man. He did this in the I believe he did this when they were doing the Young Indiana Jones TV series too.
Right,
he started like tinkering with this kind of stuff when he was like putting in like crowd shots, and that crowd was like of just like people taken, and then he would like stamp the crowd into actual footage of what it was, which is literally like every crowd shot you see nowadays. That's literally what it is. Right. It's just taking a crowd and then amplifying that times like 10.
Right.
That's what we saw in movies like Hunger Games. That what we saw in movies like every movie that you can think of, like a crowd shot. To make it huge is they would just multiply the crowds. Even Christopher Nolan would like take that into Rises, Dark Knight Rises. But that kind of stuff. He was doing that back in like when they were doing the Young Indiana Jones TV show, which obviously didn't get anywhere. But yeah, you're right. He's been doing this since the 90s with the special editions, which is my introduction to Star Wars, which came out I think in 96, 97 is when the special
97, I think.
97. That was my introduction to Star Wars, for anyone who cares. Was the special edition, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, kind of thing. But the editing is he pushed for that kind of technology to be able to, like you said, to direct into the editing process, which is what we see so much nowadays. What people don't understand is that a director isn't just someone on set saying action and trying to get actors to act, but sitting down with an editor inside a little room,
dark room,
in a dark room, and being like, "Yeah, dude, can you Can you see that again? Can you do that again?
Windows.
No windows.
Yeah,
It's that is directing on a. And if you want to get into the glamorous business of directing, that's what it is. It's just hours and hours and months of editing, and sitting down with a editor to do that stuff. But he wanted to make that process easier, and he wanted to have, like you said, a much more impact into story and into good takes. One of my favorite scenes in the behind the scenes of The Phantom Menace was when he was auditioning for young Anakin.
Yeah.
Literally in the audition process for young Anakin, which if you watch the behind the scenes of The Phantom Menace, you see the audition process for it. There's 3 little kids, and it's the terrible scene of like, "Are you an angel?"
Yeah. I know which one you're talking about. But wasn't there one that looked exactly like a young Mark Hamill?
He looked like a young Mark Hamill, and he killed the audition.
Yeah. And they cast somebody else.
And they cast Jake Lloyd. Poor Jake Lloyd. I was thinking about that when I was watching that, because we all know what happened to Jake. I know everything. Watching that shit in retrospect is so funny because you're like, oh shit. He's like, yeah, I did it, mom. 20 years later, jail. But it was funny seeing that because that kid, and he literally had a paper with the 2 kids that there were the 2 finalists for their "Are You an Angel?" scene with Natalie Portman. And it was a kid who looked like young Mark Hamill and who killed the audition. He's like, "Are you an angel? Because they're the greatest person, blah, blah, blah."
Yeah,
and he killed it. And then when they did Jake, he was like, "Are you an angel? Because they're the beautiful creatures that fall in love." And he just started ad-libbing. But he loved the ad-libs of Jake.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he turns to one of his producers or one of his editors, I don't know who he was, and he says to him, he's like, "Look at these 2 kids." And he literally points to them. And he says, "This kid right here," and he points to Jake. He says, "This kid right here messed up more takes than any other kid, but I like his natural feel that he has towards the camera. And this kid right here killed it, but it's like, whatever, it could be good for auditioning. Let me cast this kid." And the reason why, he said, is because I can cut around his bad takes. He literally said that to his producer in the audition process of the main character of your movies.
Yeah, well, he thinks ahead. I mean, well, plus
he literally said, "I can cut around his." He literally said, "I can cut around his bad takes, but I like him more because he feels more natural."
Yeah.
Because he messed up more takes than any other kid, he said, but I can cut around his takes. I'm casting that kid, and he casted Jake Lloyd, and that was our young Anakin. Right. So he literally thinks about this stuff in the audition process.
Right. He thinks that far, and you gotta understand too. Lucas doesn't really like actors all that much.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's kind of why he cast the same people and all of his stuff. But then,
also he's also kind of like not the best as far as communicating like actors, details and emotions, because that's, I mean, we've talked about Aronofsky. Right. We've talked about directors who are just like get in actors' minds and literally put them in a trance to give the best performances ever. And that's someone like an Aronofsky. George Lucas is not that kind of director.
Right.
And his auditioning isn't necessarily the greatest, even though, dude, that cast is fire. Like, think about it. Think about the cast he has for the prequels.
Yeah.
Liam Neeson,
baller.
Samuel Jackson, baller. Ewan McGregor just won an Emmy for freaking Fargo. Like, these guys are murderers in the Hollywood business. So he casts great actors, but it's funny how he doesn't necessarily get the best performances out of them. We'll get that eventually once we get into next week's episode. But he was thinking about cutting around Jake Lloyd. He's like, I can cut around his bad takes.
Right.
It's like, he's fine if he messes up like 20 takes because I can just cut around and get the best take.
Right.
Cut around like a bunch of scenes. That's crazy to me. To me, that's just personally crazy. I would never think like that, but George thinks like that. He thinks about that kind of stuff.
Right.
Finally, to finish up this conversation about technology for anyone who's fallen asleep,
it's still tuned in.
Let's talk about CGI, which I feel like is his biggest contribution that we see nowadays. So when he was making The Phantom Menace, he wanted to make the most ambitious computer-generated / live-action movie ever made, which is what The Phantom Menace is. To be fair, in that time, in 1999, that is the most ambitious one. He sat down with the main homie from ILM. I forget his name, but he sat down with him, and it's great because I get to see these in the behind the scenes. Shout out to the behind the scenes stuff that you can find on YouTube, because that shit is baller. Because some of the stuff nowadays that we see, is kind of disappointing, to be fair, as someone who buys Blu-rays all the time. Because I tune into the behind-the-scenes stuff, and I'm like, that's it? That's all you give me? The Phantom Menace behind the scenes was very transparent. Like, I'm surprised with, because he was literally openly talking about auditioning stuff, openly talking about messing up takes, like openly talking about how that person's struggling, or oh, he messed up that scene. I'm like, yo, this stuff is like blasphemy nowadays. Like nowadays you can't do that because agents will shut you down and you say you can't put that on the Blu-ray. You're making my actor look bad, or you're making this look bad. But back in 1999 when they were making this, the behind the scenes, they were talking about this kind of stuff. But he sat down with ILM and he literally said, "This is what I want. I want this stuff, and you're gonna get it done no matter what." And his producer, Rick McCallum,
sure, yeah, I think so,
during these movies was talking about like getting these shots done and being an animation director basically is what he is, right? When he's making characters like Watto, fully CGI characters like Jar Jar Binks, who became a fully CGI character, because that's not what he was intentionally going to be. He made a suit for him. He casted Ahmed Best to play Jar Jar Binks, and eventually they said, you know what? It's gonna be a fully CG computer generated character, and we're gonna make him a fully CGI character. So essentially, there's a great shot in the behind the scenes where you see Ahmed's take and you see what ILM digitally remade, and Ahmed is reacting to, like, I don't know, something coming to his face, and he goes like this, and he reacts, and then in the ILM version it cuts to the ILM version, and then it cuts to Jar Jar and he goes like they make it much more goofy and like add like hand gestures when he just went like this. Like the ILM one, he went like this, and he like made like this weird pose, which was adding to the weird comedic quote unquote comedic effect to the character of a CGI Jar Jar Binks. But George was the biggest proponent with ILM into creating seamless live action environments and characters that actors are currently interacting with nobody. People off camera telling him lines that Watto is saying, or that these people are saying. Talk about his contribution into the CGI world that we see nowadays, where every freaking thing is CGI. And this is one of the biggest things that the prequels brought us. Like it or not, it's what it is. It made stuff cheaper, it made stuff more efficient, and it made fantasy movies, sci-fi fantasy movies, much more tangible to be able to do, because you can create creatures out of computer generated images that look pretty realistic.
Right. I mean, like, of course, Lucas put a lot into digital. I mean, he's always been a visual effects innovator too. He created ILM, right? Like he originally created ILM for the purposes of making the original Star Wars movie. He was inventing all the little digital toys back in 1977 that he would go on to further manipulate and build upon into later CGI, of course, with the prequels, right? He was always he built the technology. He was building the technology and implementing it and further expanding upon it to build up into like this fully realized CGI kind of world. But then you go back in 19. I just saw a great tweet recently. I don't remember who put it out, but like they said, like the toughest thing about the original Star Wars trilogy or the original first Star Wars movie was not that George Lucas was just making a film; he was inventing it as he was going along, right? So like the digital camera movements, the way the way that they followed the models of the ships and like added in digitally like the stuff around them, the way they captured a lot of that stuff in camera and then remanipulated it digitally too was a big part. Not digitally necessarily back in 1977, but the way they're able to put the layers on top of each other influenced a lot of what visual effects will later become too, right? So then creating ILM back during that time, back in 1975, 1976, 1977, and then and letting it grow and evolve into the point that we have modern CGI now is really, I think Lucas's, because really that played a hand into Jurassic Park, right? Jurassic Park.
I was going to mention that too, but you beat me to it.
Right. Jurassic Park was ILM's big project that kind of announced their footing into visual effects. And, we talked about Indiana Jones. The young Indiana Jones also had like the first fully CGI character of all time, right? With the little sword figure, I guess, like the little glass guy who was like all glass. I don't know what his character was, but ILM did that and was the first. That was the first full CGI character. So again, Lucas was using these other forums, these other places like the Young Indiana Jones TV show, special editions to test the water for where CGI was going to be during that time. And without Lucas, you wouldn't have the idea of CGI characters really to begin with, especially like humanoid characters. We saw digital characters with the T-Rexes and the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, but we never saw like a human or a human-like kind of figure interacting with
expression, with emotion,
Right.
with gestures, with full range of face motions that you can express emotions on their face with little minute details. That's the biggest thing that Lucas wanted, to combine that with voice acting, right? Because that's what voice acting is compared to what we get now. Which it's funny seeing it in retrospect now with what we get with performance capture, because that's slightly different. Because performance capture is based on the actor.
Yeah.
It's something that we got from a Josh Brolin in Infinity War is different because that's Josh Brolin versus George Lucas directing a voice actor and then digitally reproducing his performance into a fully CGI character with ILM and an animation director and little animators who are scringing up the face and using their own face as like a reference point too, to go like this, and then they would pull like the gestures of like Watto, which I saw in the behind the scenes was the biggest one they were like pushing, was like, oh, Watto, when he goes, this is the Doria, Republic credits, no, you're some kind of Jedi, and he would like express his emotions of like, swindling Liam Neeson's character of Qui-Gon Jinn, and how he was like a cocky kind of like, gambler type of guy, and getting those emotions out of him from a CGI character.
Right. And again, Lucas, the pioneer in visual effects. Also, a little said about his pioneering in digital, and I'm sorry, not digital, and sound work as well, right? Because the sound of his movies are the biggest element, I feel like, that goes untested in his work.
Again, guys, I rewatched all the prequels. Holy jamoly, the sound in the prequels, man. The sound design to me is the most underrated thing in the Star Wars saga.
Bill Burr, I think his name Bill Burr, I think is the guy who does the sound for these. He's won multiple Special Academy Awards.
It's incredible
for his sound work.
It's incredible. Yeah, and the fact that George actually sits down and watches every dude, if I was, because I'm watching this behind the scenes really took me there, but if I was sitting down and they were showing me this sound design for the pod race, for example, was what I was watching, the scene I was watching, and he sat down and was like telling him, no, once the bulba gets closer, build that tension of the engines, because that's what the audience feels, and he's like directing sound design. Like, shout out, props to him, because I'd be like, yo, literally that'd be my reaction every time they would bring in sound design. But the sound design for the pod racing for the Phantom Menace is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Like, that's like the fact that Sebulba's engine has like a feel of like a V8 old school 50s muscle car.
Well, again, George Lucas
is a mechanic.
He was a mechanic. He was very into cars. And
it has that feel. Yeah. You feel like he's driving like an old school like muscle Mustang or some Chevelle crazy cool muscle car that's souped up, and it's got like a giant engine. That's what Sebulba's driving, and that's the kind of cockiness that he has as a racer.
Right, and going and I keep referencing the book How Star Wars Conquered the Universe. Right, when you go back and one of the first chapters, it talks about George Lucas. He was a dude. He loved cars. He worked on cars. And he wanted to actually be like a race car driver. But then he got into like this big car accident that like almost killed him, and that's what like decided. That's where he like decided like started going into film right after that point. But it's fascinating that he put that much attention and that much detail into like those racing sequences. That's something that he's always had a fascination with.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He was passionate about that pod racing scene.
Yeah.
But the sound design in that pod racing scene, the whole point of what I'm saying is the fact that he got some of the greatest sound design that we had, probably, like you just said, Oscar-winning sound design, Academy Award-winning sound design that we got from the prequels, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But the pod racing is incredible. Like the fact that little boost that Anakin has like a signature sound to it. The burr, burr, it has that. Yeah. The fact that, like I just said, the Sebulba is like a muscle car that has the and it has like every time he comes in close, goes in farther. Yeah. When he gets closer to the camera, you feel the tension of the giant engine that he has.
Right, and I think that's what makes the films feel feel so real, right? Not real necessarily, but that's what grounds it in a little bit of tangibility, making like these out of worldly sci-fi like spaceships and stuff, make them feel like cars and make them relatable to things that we would hear in real life. And again, the original trilogy did a lot of that too, right? Like
That's
the
right.
original, the whole thing with the lightsabers is just
lightsaber. You're
yeah,
right. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the most brilliant pieces of sound design.
Yes.
Right, because it's essentially just they recorded. I can't even remember what they said they recorded for it, but it was like some crazy combination of like a buzzing, But it's something that feels very familiar to us, to our ears, but something that's loud and resonant as well. And then the visual effects for those lightsabers too, right? Because when you watch the original footage of those movies, those lightsabers are just kind of just white sticks, and then ILM very carefully went in and like digitally painted over every single one during a Star Wars during the lightsaber fight. So then again, it's like those are prime examples of how influential those kind of devices are to what we understand about Star Wars today. But even more over to the sound, right? The sound design for the ships, the sound design for space, the way the Millennium Falcon has that little like when it goes into hyperspace.
The TIE fighters.
Right. The screeching, like the and then like the laser, all of that
blasters.
Stuff. Blasters. It was all I kind of never seen before, and it's very carefully put together. Again, Ben Burr, I think, is the guy who does the sound design for all of the Star Wars films, and he is by far, he's a Hollywood legend, of course, but then it's also just so influential to how we perceive sound design today. How multiple layers, and again, Coppola, and then this is also another relation to Lucas and the old school days of like him working with Coppola and Spielberg. Really, Lucas and Coppola had this company together, American Zoetrope, where they would make films together a lot of times. A lot of these shorts, they would work on each other's projects, give each other kind of advice and stuff like that. And with them hanging together and working together, they're able to develop a lot of the technology that we're familiar with now. And Lucas and Coppola kind of helped put a lot into sound design when it comes to having multiple tracks of sound design. Because when, first of all, originally when Apocalypse Now was being made, George Lucas was originally going to direct it. Not a lot of people know that, but then he went around and did Star Wars and Apocalypse Now ended up filming for like 3 years. Yeah. But like with the sound design in that, they had to literally. And this is also part of Walter Murch too. Walter Murch was the sound designer and the editor for Apocalypse Now and designer for a lot of stuff. He added a lot. Originally they could only have a certain amount of tracks per like studio recording, but Coppola had such a big vision for the sound that he wanted for this movie. They literally had to create like the 5.1 surround sound system that had enough tracks, enough layers that they could implement and have different sound elements incorporated. So Apocalypse Now is a big leader in what we have in modern sound design, but then a lot of Lucas's input and vision and technology was kind of put into that as well. So it's pretty awesome.
It's incredible how many things are currently iconic with the sound design. Right. Let's finish up by talking about a little bit about his contribution with the music. With John Williams, who currently scores most of the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, and the Indiana Jones movies
Indiana Jones movies as well. Obviously because of Steven Spielberg and their connection with Lucasfilm Productions, which is what Steven has done with Lucas. But it's crazy rewatching this behind the scenes that I've been talking about so much, but watching it with a Phantom Menace and a current piece of music that we recently mentioned before, that is one of the most iconic Star Wars scores, in my opinion, and it was a newer Star Wars score, which was The Duel of the Fates, and how you would see John Williams do his orchestra and actually conduct his orchestra while watching footage of the actual cut together fight scene, and how Lucas would watch the footage and hear the score at the same time and actually give notes to a legend like John Williams. Right. And I was like, you really want to talk music to John Williams? Because I'd be like, yeah, I think you got it, man. I think you're good. I think you know more than I do. But George Lucas would give him notes. He would literally be like, oh, Mr. John, how about just a choir now? And then da, da, da. And he would say, and John was like, you just want the choir in this moment? He's like, yeah, just the choir. And it's like, damn, bro, that takes balls. For me, it takes balls. But for John, it's like he respects George as an artist too.
Right.
And the fact that he's able to collaborate with George to create the most iconic Star Wars music. The most iconic music, period, in Hollywood history, in my opinion, in movie history.
I mean, the Indiana Jones theme is still
even the Indiana Jones theme too. But yes, it's or the Imperial March for Star Wars, or Luke's theme. Or the Force's theme, whatever people want to call it. To me, that's the most iconic, in my opinion. The throne room is still one of my favorites.
Right, and you talk about Duel of the Fates.
Duel of the Fates is another one of my favorites.
I mean, that's probably one of the most influential scores of like modern times, in the fact that really almost every movie trailer now kind of apes like the whole like the singing, like the chorus vibe, like the da 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 da, like the whole epic kind of feel. That plays a lot into like what trailers are now and how music is now. So
yeah. But the fact that he was able to collaborate with people to make not just great music, because great music doesn't make great scores. Let's just make that a point. Great music is great music. Great scores is a contribution. It's an addition. It's a fusion towards the art of motion picture, which is basically visual combination with musical, right? It's seeing an action scene, infusing it with an incredible score that increases the tension, that adds to the tension, that makes you feel like you're more connected to the scene that you're currently watching, especially in an action scene, or especially in a racing scene, or whatever it might be. A score is so important as a contribution to that. You look at movies nowadays, even like Mad Max Fury Road, even scores and that come together with action scenes, or scores that come together with movies that are incredible, and that fuse so well together with the themes and the vibe and the feel of a movie, right? And that's what John Williams did with George Lucas, with the original trilogy and with the prequels. They created iconic pieces of music. What do you feel like that is overall as a legacy point for him?
I mean, the music, of course, like you said, like he gave a lot of talk and I guess, and really, I think all directors kind of collaborate with their composers to some extent.
Not all directors make the most iconic shit ever, bro.
Well, not a lot of directors work with John Williams.
That's true. That's true.
But of course,
but I gotta say, man,
relationship.
I gotta push back on that a little bit though, because I still feel like everyone's gonna say, everyone has their favorite John Williams score, so I'm obviously gonna step on people's toes right now. I love the Jurassic Park one. I think that's one of the greatest ones of all time. But at the same time, man, at the end of the day, Harry Potter is cool. I love the little jingle that he has for Harry Potter. I love Steven Spielberg's contribution to Jurassic Park. Or Close Encounters. He does Close Encounters, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Or Jaws. But at the same time, I just feel like what he contributes to is space opera, right? The term space opera feels even more like a John Williams kind of feel, right? I don't know if you feel that way too. The fact that we are in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. The fact we're in a different place that we've never seen before, with different planets, with different races of people, that score contributes to that so well, in my opinion. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Even more so than Harry Potter, even more so than Jurassic Park. In my opinion, this is my opinion. Sorry, guys, I'm stepping on people's toes as a Star Wars fan. I feel like that contributes to the "where are we" kind of feel. That score helps so much as like, whoa, this shit's wild. Like we're in a different freaking galaxy right now.
Right. No, I mean, that's the biggest thing of score to do, is put you in a place, to put you in an environment, and I think Lucas understands that in a way that allows the music to be put and have these various type of themes. You know what I mean? Because what John Williams represents is a lot more of like the classical Hollywood type of score, right? Like very colorful, very lively, a lot of orchestras, a lot of different instruments being used, and having like individual themes for like each character or each place and each environment. So Lucas does play into that when he's putting these movies together too, right? Like almost to a certain extent, right? Like each character has to have their own feel, their own type of energy. And I think he captures that really well in the original trilogy. With having Han have his music, Leia have her music, like we see it a lot.
I love that score, dude.
Yeah,
Leia's
yeah.
theme, oh, it's so good.
Right, and themes for Luke, themes for the Dark Vader, and themes for the Empire as well. So and of course he implements that into the prequels as well, and like we mentioned, Indiana Jones. So of course, like
Duel of the Fates,
right.
Across the Stars. For anyone who loves that, I love Across the Stars.
Right, and music is always going to be an important part to George Lucas. I mean, look at American Graffiti we talked about before.
True.
That's a very music heavy motion picture. I mean that the music in that movie is the majority of the budget of it. Honestly, like if you look into it, so it's just fascinating how he looks his music and interprets the music from the pretty much like the script level on up of how these scenes are going to play and how important the emotions are tied into the music that a lot of times John Williams composes for the films that he's involved in. And you look at the newer films that he produced. What was that animated thing that he produced pretty recently that came out? George Lucas, that was like 2015 that came out. It was like some musical type shit that was like animated.
Oh, I'm not sure.
It was some sort of, I can't remember if
that he produced or that he directed.
He produced like this animated film that came out like 2015, I think. That was a musical. So I'm just saying that in reference to
Strange Magic.
Strange Magic. There he goes. Boom. Okay. Yeah. This was like a musical that he produced like in 2015, right? Was that
2015? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was another a musical. So for him, music is a big thing for Lucas, and I think that's why the music in his films often play out to be like these big iconic kind of scored and type deals. So
yeah, I mean, obviously, guys, let's finish up by giving him credit on a few other things. We've gone a little bit longer than I wanted to, but obviously, I mean, like you said about producing as far as Strange Magic, that's a big thing that he produced. I don't think he directed Red Tails, but he's an executive producer on Red Tails.
Came out, yeah.
But they pimped out Lucas like crazy. I remember those trailers being like from Lucas,
from the creator of Star Wars.
Yeah, and it's like, yo, this is crazy.
Like
did you see this movie?
Yeah, man. Yeah,
directed by Anthony Hemingway.
Yeah, Anthony Hemingway does a lot of television. Salute to that guy for.
What'd you think of Red Tails, man?
It's cool.
I don't think I've seen this movie.
Yeah,
I don't recall it.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely one that came out my freshman year of high school, and then like it came out in February, so it was definitely like the Black History Month movie of like that month, you know?
Yeah.
Because we only get one Black History movie each February. But this movie was definitely, it was about the Tuskegee Airmen who were instrumental in World War I. World War II. World War II is also a thing that Lucas cares very much about too, right?
That's right.
That's something that, of course, is a heavy theme in the original trilogy's films and the Indiana Jones pictures as well. But then, with and concern to Red Tails in particular, that's a film that's very much grounded in like the Black history Lucas has always had an affection for Black history, for Black people in general. I mean, he's married to a Black woman now.
He is, yeah.
Too. Yeah, so he cares a lot about that stuff, and Red Tails is very, very much a
it's got a great cast too.
Great cast. Cuba Gooding Jr. is in it. Who else is it? There's a big ensemble in that film. And it's important subject matter.
Terrence Howard is in it. Nate Parker, David Oyelowo, Neo. Michael B. Jordan's in it.
That's right. This was before Chronicle. But yeah, so this is a pretty stacked cast of people. And again, piloting is something that George Lucas cares a lot about.
That's right.
World War II is something that George Lucas cares a lot about.
And we see those themes come up and up again in the Star Wars franchise as well.
Right. Particularly in World War II. That's why. That's where a lot of his battle scenes are kind of influenced from, like those World War II type tapes.
And let's finish up real quick by talking about his other biggest contribution into story is Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones was kind of George Lucas's little baby that he had when Steven Spielberg wanted to direct a James Bond movie.
Right.
And he's like, well, I got something that's not James Bond, but it's kind of like James Bond. And it's this idea that I've had for a while. And it's this idea of this basically archaeologists going around punching Nazis, saving artifacts, and has this kind of cool swagger to him, kind of like an indie vibe. played by Harrison Ford, who obviously is continuing into the Lucasfilm franchise with, Han Solo.
Right.
But that's his other big contribution. And it's so funny rewatching Raiders of the Lost Ark and watching George Lucas's writing come to fruition.
Right,
Obviously directed by a director who's probably a much better director, but you still get those Lucas kind of humorous moments and kind of goofy moments, and I'm just like, yo, this is definitely written by George Lucas. Make no mistake about it. This is a Lucas Spielberg collaboration, and it's so freaking funny. I don't know why I find it funny, guys, but I will always find it funny that these guys are like homies. They're friends, and they're like, yo, let me tell you about this moment, and Steven's like, yeah, cool, great. Steven has like a big personality. He's got a huge, we talked about Steven obviously in our Steven Spielberg episode, and if you watch like Steven Spielberg behind the scenes, he's got a huge personality. Like, I forgot how big he is like behind the scenes, versus like a much more subdued George, who's like kind of waving his hand and talking like this and really low, and George and Steven's reacting like, yeah, that's great, George, great idea, yeah, and he's like screaming and shit, and he's like, oh my god, this is so cool, and he's like talking about the design of like the creatures and shit that he had for Star Wars and the Phantom Menace. Because that's the other thing that we obviously didn't talk about, is his contribution towards creature design, towards costume design, towards practical effects mixed with CG effects. Like he did every single detail of like a movie making process. George always has that. But let's go back to Indiana Jones. What do you think this is his? What do you think as far as like his legacy for this franchise? Do you feel like, obviously it's more of a Steven thing to you? Do you feel like it's more of a Steven Spielberg product at the end of the day?
I kind of almost think of it more of like a George Lucas thing too, and the reason I think of it that way is because it follows the same kind of inkage of like the Star Wars formula. Right?
That's what I was gonna say. It's a Lucas script.
right.
You're like, this is Lucas, here.
Right. It feels like a George Lucas thing. I mean, of course, it's like the Han Solo Indiana Jones comparison comes up a lot because they're not similar characters, but they have the same kind of role.
They have the same kind of swag.
Yeah, same kind of swag, exactly. And they're both kind of influenced by like that old cinema, right? The old 1930s adventure films, the Buck Rogers, swashbuckling kind of adventure type things, you know what I mean? So like they both kind of embody that in their own kind of way, but Indiana Jones kind of does it more outwardly, right? It's more of an adventure of like those old, like, oh, Tarzan going through the jungle or something like that, you know what I mean? Like those old kind of like explorer, adventurer type deals, and it deals with that imagery a lot. So that's why I feel like it's a lot more of a Lucas thing, because it plays into like his like serialized, what he grew up on as a child of those kind of films. So
sure,
but to me, it definitely has a lot of Spielbergisms too, right? I mean, it's very much a lot of the movies revolve, particularly like The Last Crusade, the father and son relationship. That's also much more of a Steven Spielberg thing too. But then it has like the ideas of like a Lucas thing and what they represent and what they feel is what the feel in the environment of the time, place, and what they're saying reflexively as a movie. Because I feel like, when you look at these films, they take place in slightly different time periods, but they all kind of slightly evokes different images of those time periods, right? Like the original one is that like 1939, or it took place in 1939 if I'm not mistaken, right? Of like the World War II, the Nazis, the height of the Nazis, but it has that like old school like dun 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 dun, like like we talked the adventure,
that score is like, I'm gonna go on an adventure,
right.
I'm gonna use my whip to swing and shit,
right, and that's another piece of sound design that's like kind
that's
of
true, that whip,
right? So it embodies that, but then as you go into like Temple of Doom, that takes place a little bit before, but kind of deals with like the stereotypical kind of portrayal of like Chinese people and
that's right,
or Asian people in general.
Yeah.
That kind of, so it evokes a lot of those like time periods that it takes place in.
Sure.
Through a cinematic standpoint.
But it's also the thematic point and the purpose of Indiana Jones in general is the fact that he's very much obsessed with keeping cultural intact, basically.
Keeping history out of the wrong hands.
Yeah, keeping history out of the wrong hands, and keeping tyranny or persecution of people like the Nazis, away from stuff that should live in history in a positive light.
Right, and that's a very real thing too, right? Like that's what Nazis really tried to do, was try to rewrite history, destroying artifacts, taking art. That's what that whole movie Monuments Men was about, that George Clooney was in.
That's right.
That was directed by George Clooney, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that's what that whole movie's about, is like how the Nazis were still in art and just like destroying it or manipulating it or changing it to satisfy their agendas or whatever. So I mean, that's a very prominent thing, I feel like, in the Indiana Jones franchise as well, and how like the influence of like these hacky governments, dictatorships impress upon the preservation of this stuff, right? And again, you think of something like Kingdom of Crystal Skull, which a lot of people don't like to think about, but that's also a movie that is about like how, again, the time period, right, set in like the 1950s. This time is more of a communist kind of fear, right? How like they're scared that like these communist governments are going to take this artifact and use it for like the nefarious, for the nefarious type of governments, their type of leaderships, for their nefarious actions to come forward. And even in that's why it adopted more of a sci-fi feel, because in 1950s we start to see more science fiction movies being made, and it held consistent with that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and it also has obviously watching it, and it's funny how the artifacts are like something like the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, right. All this crazy stuff that we hear about from the Bible, basically. I mean, this comes straight from the Bible, right? And it's funny knowing about this stuff, because of someone who would attend Sunday school all the time and who would know about this stuff, like the Ark of the Covenant, like all this other stuff that comes up, especially the Ark of the Covenant, because I feel like the Ark of the Covenant is just classic, right? I mean, the stories of David dancing before the Ark, the stories of people who would die in the presence of the Ark, the people who were unholy in the presence of the Ark. And the face melting scene, man, we got to talk about that face melting scene. It's just classic, and it's funny how it's classic, but it also pushed what we have nowadays into PG-13 rating. Because that is one of the pushes was
Temple of Doom had a big part into the ratings system creating.
Because it was the cutting of the heart, right?
Taking out somebody's heart.
Because they were like, this isn't sexual, but it's kind of messed up as far as violence. I don't think it's parental guidance. I think it's more than parental guidance, but it's not quite R.
It's not R,
Yeah, so it's like a middle ground. So it's because R would be a little bit more gory, probably.
Yeah.
But this one is much more not quite in that sense of gore.
Right.
Right?
I mean, it's very
or language too, because language plays a big part of it. Because it's that relationship that Stephen had with the MPAA. Manager or president or whatever that created Indiana Jones, kind of had a hand in creating the PG-13 rating.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the heart cutting out, it wasn't R because it was cartoony, right? It's kind of cartoony.
Yeah,
like the dude has.
But as a kid watching
it's still
dude, that and the face melting.
Yeah.
As a kid, I was like 7 or 8 when I watched that, or probably like younger, 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Bruh, that killed me, bruh.
Yeah.
I was like, no, this is too much.
Super wild.
Yeah.
And then, I think I've always thought it was funny that he cuts out the heart and the dude's still alive. The fuck? So,
yeah.
I think that's why they were like, all right.
Well, I think it's also I think that's a weird thing that people have talked about before is if they cut out your heart, how long do you live? I think it's a few seconds, right?
Yeah.
I think it's 3 or 4 seconds, but they made it longer.
This dude's literally alive. What the fuck?
Yeah.
And they even say he cut out his heart and he's still alive. It's a wild thing. So I don't know. I always thought that
didn't work.
Yeah.
I thought this was the one.
Yeah. So I don't know.
But I just think that's
PG-13. Yeah, and that and Gremlins, the Temple of Doom and Gremlins are the 2 movies that push towards the PG-13.
Sure.
From that point on, Raiders of the Lost Ark was rated PG-13. Temple of Doom was rated PG-13, and so was many other films that came out after too. So
yeah, and there you go. Now we have PG-13 because of these guys in Hollywood, because of George and because of Steven.
Yeah. And
come on.
You look at, you watch, we talk about that Steven Spielberg documentary on HBO. You can also look at the Brian De Palma documentary that he got that's on Amazon. Amazon Prime. It's called just De Palma, and he talks about the same kind of stuff, them all being friends, Brian De Palma and Lucas and Steven Spielberg and
you gotta give me that Prime account, bro.
Yeah,
give me that Prime so I can watch that shit. I don't got Prime.
Oh, you don't got Prime? They have a student discount that's 50%
off.
Yeah,
you jerk. Damn. I'm on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, man, $50 a year. It's not bad. But yeah, no. Again, like they all kind of watched each other's things and were involved in each other's projects.
Who was the one that came up with the idea of the opening credits of the scrolling credits?
Oh, scrolling credits. I think that was De Palma.
Well, it was De Palma, right?
Somebody. Yeah.
I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was De Palma because I saw the
Francis Ford Coppola. Maybe.
Or Coppola.
Yeah.
Because it was the Steven Spielberg documentary talked about Star Wars.
Right.
And they talked about how George was like, I have this crazy idea, and he showed like De Palma, with Coppola,
right. And De Palma talks
Spielberg,
about that in the movie,
and they sat down and watched it, and they're like, "What the shit is this?"
Yeah.
But someone, I think one of those guys came up with the idea of like, dude, you need to tell people what's going on because otherwise this shit's weird.
Right.
So it's
and
too
again,
weird.
And it apes like the whole 1930s like opening thing of like the textures being there and like telling you what's happening. It's definitely is Lucas has always had a complicated relationship with like writing and characters and exposition.
Correct.
And that plays a lot into his script, but he also allows a certain level of the actors putting their own persona into it too. So I think that's why the characters feel a little more fleshed out in terms of, when you look at like Indiana Jones, for example, right? Not like the deepest like character, right? Like not like the biggest philosophy, but it's the personality that putting a Harrison Ford type in there really lends to that and
exactly
and brings out that extroverted kind of sense of like being like the super crazy Nazi hunter art thief, so super dope.
Awesome
stuff.
That concludes our conversation on George Lucas, guys. Please tune in next week where we talk about Star Wars. We're going to be talking about all Star Wars franchise. We're going to talk about the OG, the prequels. We were going to talk about it, which is why we wore these shirts. We'll probably wear these shirts again next week. Right. Because we got to match up with Star Wars. We were going to talk about it today, guys, but we felt like we wanted to talk more about George's contribution as a whole to film and to cinema as a whole. So next week, tune in for Star Wars, where I will be wearing my Captain Phasma t-shirt, the best Star Wars character ever. What up?
Oh, shit. I know about all that.
But tune in next week, guys. Let us know what you thought about our conversation on George Lucas and what is your favorite contribution of him, whether it be his collaboration with music, CGI, digital and film. What do you guys think about this whole process that we just dived into right now? What did you guys think about Solo? Let us know in the comments down below because we will be reading them and we'll be bashing you live on camera because that's what we do.
Yeah, Tony Wagner. I have no problem with Tony Wagner.
I love Tony. I seriously do love Tony. I just crush on girls, man. Stop judging me, man. All right, guys, tune in next week where we talk about Star Wars. I'm Ace.
I'm RB3.
And we are peace out.